Welcome to the Mythical Astronomy Variety Hour. No, it's not the Variety Hour. It's the Daenerys live discussion, roundtable, anything goes, Q&A. Thanks for coming by, everyone. I'm joined by Ball the Bard and Quinn from Quinn's Ideas, who so illustrious and well-known they need no introduction, but I'll give you a very quick introduction. Ball the Bard is from the Fundamentals, and her YouTube channel is called...
I made The Dragon's Reign.
The Dragon's Reign, yes. And it is going to be about...
The Dance of the Dragons.
Yes, the Dance of the Dragons.
My first script is completely done. I just need to record a video and then make it. And then that'll go up soon.
Ball the Bard is getting ready to lay the lumber. She's bringing out the big guns, focusing all her intellect and insight onto the Dance of the Dragons and looking for parallels to the end games and just having a ton of fun with it. And of course, Quinn from Quinn's Ideas used to be Ideas of Ice and Fire. Now it is just Quinn's Ideas because you have so many ideas. They have gone beyond the realm of Ice and Fire.
Indeed, yeah. I have a YouTube channel where I cover various fantasy and sci-fi series, but don't worry about that. Get put on the email list for my upcoming graphic novel, Tadia. Just Google it. Tadia Kingbreaker. Get put on the email list. Story about witchcraft and mythology. Super excited about it. Yeah. I love witches.
Awesome. I think I need to make a couple more mods so people can drop some links here. Who do I trust?
Yes, that's a good idea.
Anyone I trust? Mod Mary. She's got mod in her name. Let's give her mod powers. I've got to go over to YouTube to do that. Okay, I'll do that in a second. In any case, well, you have mod powers. Gretchen, go ahead and drop your own link in there. Self-promote.
The power of the mod.
There it is. All right. So we are going to do a few things today. We are going to take as many questions as you guys can throw at us. We are going to kick around some general topics for discussion. We're going to basically approach anything in Dany's arc. I'm going to give Quinn and Ball and Melanie Lot7, who will be joining us shortly, a chance to comment on some of the stuff that we've already covered in the last 3 Dany episodes. And we're going to do a little bit of material from A Storm of Swords that we didn't finish last time. And we are going to start off with a dramatic reading, which I am calling The Trolling of the Sellsword Captains. Yes, and of course, this is in Yunkai. Dany is camped outside Yunkai, and she has the captains of the Second Sons and the Storm Crows, and then the Yunkish envoy come, and she banters. And we start hearing Dany throw out some of her best trolling lines, and she's a really good troll, as it turns out. So I thought it would be fun to read some of this. So first, we have the Storm Crows, and I'm going to narrate. Ball the Bard is going to do Daenerys, and Quinn will play the role of Prendel Nagazine. He volunteered, by the way. I didn't pull that out, just for the record. So it was Prendel Nagazine who spoke for the sellswords.
You would do well to take your rabble elsewhere,
he said.
You took Astapor by treachery, but Yunkai shall not fall so easily.
500 of your storm crows against 10,000 of my unsullied,
said Dany.
I am only a young girl and do not understand the ways of war, yet these odds seem poor to me.
The storm crows do not stand alone,
said Prendel.
Storm crows do not stand at all. They fly at the first sign of thunder. Perhaps you should be flying now. I have heard that sellswords are notoriously unfaithful. What will it avail you to be staunch when the Second Sons change sides?
That will not happen,
Prendel insisted, unmoved.
And if it did, it would not matter. The Second Sons are nothing. We fight beside the stalwart men of Yunkai.
You fight beside bedboys armed with spears.
When she turned her head, the twin bells in her braid rang softly.
Once battle is joined, do not think to ask for quarter. Join me now, however, and you shall keep the gold the Yunkai paid you, and claim a share of the plunder besides, with greater rewards later when I come into my kingdom. Fight for the wise masters, and your wages will be death. Do you imagine that Yunkai will open its gates when my unsullied are butchering you beneath the walls?
Woman, you bray like an ass, and make no more sense.
Woman?
She chuckled.
Is that meant to insult me? I would return the slap if I took you for a man.
Dany met his stare.
I am Daenerys Stormborn of House Targaryen, the Unburnt, mother of dragons, Khaleesi to Drogo's riders, and queen of the 7 kingdoms of Westeros.
So there you go. That's the first time we see the I am but a girl and know little of the ways of war, which Dany uses repeatedly to troll people. And it's kind of a clever line because she's basically using her disadvantage to her advantage. You know, she's flat out, she's sort of pointing at the elephant in the room. Oh, I'm just, I'm only 15 and I just sort of wandered in here. I don't really know what I'm doing, but I'm about to take your city and burn you down. So
yeah, she sounds so awesome and badass here.
Good stuff. And like for a teenage girl, like being faced with who is probably like a very large man, like wearing armor and very imposing, and she's just like sitting there, like, yeah, whatever. I'll shoot the shit with you. You got some shit to throw at me, I'll throw it right back. Yeah. Don't even.
And it's important to recognize that everything Dany's doing is very intentional, just like she did when she was negotiating with the Wise Masters, where she kept up an elaborate ruse in order to turn the situation to her advantage. She doesn't act very emotional in these negotiations and these confrontations. She's very calculated. She comes in with a strategy and she executes it. And she has a different strategy for each of these sellsword captains, which is one of the things I wanted to point out. So whether she's acting tough or acting meek or acting aggressive, like all of these things are calculated. This is not someone who's emotionally leaping back and forth during these conversations. So just want to point that out as we go through this. So at the end of this conversation, Dany cleverly asks if the Storm Crows are free men, knowing full well that they are. And of course they pipe up, of course we're free. And then she says, all right, well, then tell everyone else my offer. And maybe some of them will have better sense than you and want to switch sides. And it turns out that, she ends up, somebody does hear her, which is Daario, who's the third captain in this scene. He doesn't really say anything in the scene, but as they're leaving, he sort of nods his head to Dany. And then, of course, later he cuts the heads off the other two and turns tail. So pretty good strategy executed here. So the next one is Mero. Quinn, I will again give you the choice if you want to narrate or do Mero.
I'll do Mero.
You'll do Mero? Okay, all right.
Do I censor it or no?
Just well, I only did half the conversation. I cut off some of the worst stuff. So okay. No, you can say the F word, I guess. We'll just don't say the F word because then YouTube will you'll have to just mute it yourself.
Okay.
Do that. All right. So Mero tossed down his wine straight away, wiped his mouth with the back of his hand, and leered at Dany.
I believe your twin sister in a pleasure house back home, or was it you?
I think not. I would remember men of such magnificence, I have no doubt.
Yes, that is so. No woman has ever forgotten the Titan's bastard.
The Bravosi held out his cup to Jiki.
What say you take those clothes off and come sit on my lap? If you please me, I might bring the second sons over to your side.
If you bring the second sons over to my side, I might not have you gelded.
The big man laughed.
Little girl, another woman once tried to geld me with her teeth. She has no teeth now, but my sword is as long and thick as ever. Shall I take it out and show you?
No need. After my eunuchs cut it off, I can examine it at my leisure.
Dany took a sip of wine.
It is true that I am only a young girl and do not know the ways of war. Explain to me how you propose to defeat 10,000 unsullied with your 500. Innocent as I am, those odds seem poor to me.
The second sons have faced worse odds and won.
The second sons have faced worse odds and ran. At Qohor, when the 3,000 made their stand. Or do you deny it?
That was many and more years ago, before the second sons were led by the Titan's bastard.
So it is from you they get their courage.
Dany turned to Sir Jorah.
When the battle is joined, kill this one first.
The Exile Knight smiled. Gladly, your grace.
Oh, I was going to say it.
I cut off the rest because Mero just gets worse and worse and he gets more vulgar, but it's just more of the same. The cool thing is that Dany continues playing to his ego and talking about the second son switching sides, sort of playfully saying, oh yeah, you should come over. You can return that gold, bloody. And in the end, she gives him a whole wagon full of wine casks to get his buddies drunk. And the key thing is that she asks for his answer in the morning, knowing full well she's going to attack in the middle of the night when they're all drunk. And she's also told the Yunkish, or she will in a minute, she's going to tell the Yunkish 3 days. So she's doing lots of things to make people think, she's not quite ready to attack yet when she is going to. That's the setup. So now, Quinn, I do have to insist on doing the Yunkish envoy. This is the one I was excited about. So
okay, sure.
Give me the narrator on this one, and I'll take the envoy.
Okay. The man on the white camel named himself Grazdan Moeras, lean and hard. He had the white smile such as Krasn's had worn until Drogon burned his face off. His hair was drawn up in a unicorn's horn that jutted from his brow. His toga was fringed with golden Myrish lace.
Ancient and glorious is Yunkai, the queen of cities,
he said when Dany welcomed him to her
Our
tent.
walls are strong, our nobles proud and fierce, our common folk without fear. Ours is the blood of ancient geese, whose empire was old when Valyria was yet a squalling child. You were wise to sit and speak, Khaleesi. You shall find no easy conquest here.
Good. My Unsullied will relish a bit of a fight.
She looked to Grey Worm, who nodded. Grazdan shrugged expansively.
If blood is what you wish, let it flow. I am told you freed your eunuchs. Freedom means as much to an Unsullied as a hat to a haddock.
He smiled at Grey Worm, but the eunuch might have been made of stone.
Those who survive we shall enslave again and use to retake Astapor from the rabble. We can make a slave of you as well, do not doubt it. There are pleasure houses in Lys and Tyrosh where men would pay handsomely to bed the last Targaryen. Dany?
Oh, sorry.
I know I've mesmerized you.
I lost track of where I was. It is good to see you know who I am,
said Dany mildly.
I pride myself on my knowledge of the savage, senseless West.
Grazdan spread his hands, a gesture of conciliation.
And yet, why should we speak thus harshly to one another? It is true that you committed savageries in Astapor, but we Yunkai are a most forgiving people. Your quarrel is not with us, your grace. Why squander your strength against our mighty walls when you need every man to regain your father's throne in far Westeros? Yunkai wishes you only well in that endeavor. And to prove the truth of that, I have brought you a gift.
He clapped his hands, and two of his escort came forward bearing a heavy cedar chest bound in bronze and gold. They set it at her feet.
50,000 golden marks,
Grazdan said smoothly.
Yours, as a gesture of friendship from the wise masters of Yunkai. Gold given freely is better than plunder bought with blood, surely. So I say to you, Daenerys Targaryen, take this chest and go.
Dany pushed open the lid of the chest with a small, slippered foot. It was full of gold coins, just as the envoy said. She grabbed a handful and let them run through her fingers. They shone brightly as they tumbled and fell. New minted, most of them, stamped with the stepped pyramid on the face and the harpy of Gis on the other.
Very pretty. I wonder how many chests like this I shall find when I take your city.
He chuckled.
None, for that you shall never do.
I have a gift for you as well.
She slammed the chest shut.
3 days. On the morning of the 3rd day, send out your slaves, all of them. Every man, woman, and child shall be given a weapon and as much food, clothing, coin, and goods as he or she can carry. These they shall be allowed to choose freely from among their master's possessions, as payment for their years of servitude. When all the slaves have departed, you will open your gates and allow my Unsullied to enter and search your city, to make certain none remain in bondage. If you do this, Yunkai will not be burned or plundered, and none of your people shall be molested. The wise masters will have the peace they desire, and will have proved themselves wise indeed. What say you?
I say you are mad.
Am I?
Dany shrugged and said,
Dracarys.
The dragons answered. Rhaegal hissed and smoked, Viserion snapped, and Drogon spat swirling red-black flame. It touched the drape of Grazdan's tokar, and the silk caught in half a heartbeat. Golden marks spilled across the carpets as the envoy stumbled over the chest, shouting curses and beating at his arm until Whitebeard flung a flagon of water over him to douse the flames.
You swore I should have safe conduct,
the Yunkish envoy wailed.
Do all the Yunkai whine so over a singed tokar? I shall buy you a new one, if you deliver up your slaves within 3 days. Elsewise, Drogon shall give you a warmer kiss.
She wrinkled her nose.
You've soiled yourself. Take your gold and go, and see that the wise masters hear my message.
Grazdan Moeras pointed a finger.
You shall rue this arrogance. These little lizards will not keep you safe, I promise you. We will fill the air with arrows if they come within a league of Yunkai. Do you think it is so hard to kill a dragon?
Harder than to kill a slaver. 3 days, Grazden. Tell them, by the end of the 3rd day, I will be in Yunkai, whether you open your gates for me or no.
All right, so there we go. Yeah, let's not analyze whatever accent I was just doing. I opened my mouth and things came out. I'm not sure what that was, but just trying to make him sound ridiculous and silly. But
changing, it evolves. It's just...
Yeah, I don't do actual accents. It's probably better that way. So in any case, you can see Dany's got, like I said, she's using different strategy with each one of them. The main thing is that she has to project some kind of power. She has to speak to these people in a language they can understand. And so she's making threats and being nice and sort of, going back and forth with it. But the bottom line, the main deception that she's performing is just to make them think that they've got a few days to chill and think about all this. And when they don't. So she ends up taking the city with very little casualties. And that's actually the main thing that stuck out to me when I was looking at the taking of not Astapor, but Yunkai and then Meereen, is that she's constantly worried about casualties, not only because she has not a huge army, but just because that's kind of her nature. And she just she's not the kind of commander like Tywin to just, send her troops into the meat grinder in order to win the battle or whatever. So let's see here. Like, for example, after they win the battle, she's hearing about the reports of their great victory from Jorah, and she asks Jorah about their own losses, to which he replies, 12, if that many. And the next line is, only then did she allow herself to smile. So, George puts those little lines in just to show us, like, Dany's not quite happy until she hears about the casualties on her own side, and then she can relax. So little stuff like that.
So wait, you're telling me that the idea that she would just indiscriminately burn a city where her own troops could also die, that doesn't make sense? You're telling me that doesn't make sense with this character in the books? What?
No, it makes perfect sense.
Let's get it all out. Come on, let's get it out.
Oh my gosh, you guys, did you? That's my cat. Just so you know.
Meow.
That is my old man.
Sound like Hitler at all? Not even a little bit.
No.
Oh, they were saying that you were starting to make Dany sound like a vampire.
Really?
Yeah. For once, it's not me under the microscope.
Oh, someone said nice shirt, Quinn. Thank you. Yeah. It's Rick and Morty. I love this show. Best show. Best cartoon.
Yep. Yellow Vine Water confirmed.
Wait, how was I starting to make Dany sound like a vampire?
I don't know. But
all I saw was Maud Mary saying that you were starting to sound like Dracula.
Oh, maybe we're all. Yeah. I was thinking about it.
The real vampires are the friends we made along the way.
Yeah. See, Dany has draconic power. I only have baconic power. See?
Hey.
I thought of that today when I was making bacon. Until now. All right. So one thing that is interesting, guys, that I noticed is that the it's never actually said why she decides to take Meereen. So Astapor, we can see how that happens. She comes there to get the army. She realizes the only way she can get the army is to free the Unsullied and topple the Masters. Once she does that, she's upended the power structure. And so later we find out that she left a council of like a healer, a priest, and a scribe or something that was supposed to rule as a council. It didn't work out. King Cleon the Butcher, the first, and then the second rose instead. But that we figured out. Now, when she moves on to Yunkai, it seems like her intention is to basically free the slaves. And so she pulls up in front of the gates and she says, give me all your slaves and I'll let you be. But she kind of knows they're not going to do that. Mm-hmm. So essentially she's coming here to take the city. So at some point in between Astapor and Yunkai, she has decided to go ahead and now start liberating slaves. It's no longer just a matter of getting an army. And this is interesting because in Astapor, we were trying to figure out some of this is based on pure need. She needs the Unsullied. This is the way that she can get them because she can't pay for them. But then also clearly she feels strongly about freeing the slaves and she feels bad about what the Unsullied practices and all that. But at this point, she's full on switched now to being a conqueror / liberator, meaning I'm going to sweep through Slaver's Bay and free all of these slaves. So thoughts on that? Like she's become a revolutionary here.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's interesting that Martin doesn't give us that moment of transformation, like from her perspective, like that we don't see her thinking it. We just like see it through her actions. I think that was an interesting choice.
Yeah, it was. We get more when we come to Meereen, we get a lot more talk about how she feels about the city. And of course, the thing about Meereen is she sees the crucified children all the way there. And so that really changes her. But they also, let's go ahead and skip to that. I've got this actually. So guys, if you scroll down on the notes to page is page 9, where it says ASOS Dany 5. There's a couple of good discussions about taking
page 9
and yeah, on the dock.
I see it.
It's like 11. If you scroll down, it shows the pages on the side.
There you go.
Hey guys, I want to make sure Mel isn't messaging me on my phone. Can you take a comment from the chat and hold it down for a quick second? Thank you.
Sure, yeah. Let's see.
Mama Pipple says, I think she can't let people suffer, especially since she knows what it's like to be sold and lose agency. I think that's exactly right. It comes from her experience.
It comes from her experience. Well, she was virtually a slave of her brothers her entire life. And then she comes right out of that situation and even a literal situation of slavery where she's like Khal Drogo slave, literally being sold. So she definitely understands what it's like firsthand.
Right. And Alyssa Patient says 163 crucified slaves. Good Queen Alysanne would have done the same thing. I think you're exactly right, Alyssa. I think like Good Queen Alysanne absolutely would have done the same thing that Dany did. I mean, Good Queen Alysanne had very strong opinions about the treatment of the small folk and women and the marginalized. She would have. I can imagine her doing it, and then Jaehaerys being like, "Are you sure that was baby? We should have not done that." And she's like, "Oh, fuck that. F that. No."
I am told that there was a super chat at the beginning that I missed when we were doing our dramatic reading. It was from Pat. For the super chat. Was there a question attached, or was it just a super chat?
I believe it was just there was a question about, it was from Pat Riley, I believe.
Cool. Well,
I can't remember but it was a specific thing about what we think about something. I just can't remember.
I'm sure Pat will drop it in the chat and we will. And I don't know how to change names. I heard about you critiquing my spelling before the stream started.
Oh, the question was, is Daario hot? What are our feelings about Daario being hot?
Yeah, clearly Daario is hot. I mean, we have to conclude that because Dany doesn't go for anything other than like man candy. I mean, that's kind of her MO. So, we have to imagine that somehow he pulls off the whole blue and gold hair and tri-colored beard. I mean, you know.
Look, if Dennis Rodman can pull off what he did with his hair.
You know, that's actually the perfect comp.
Right.
That's perfect. He nailed that. He is like Dennis Rodman, only like with a little more, maybe a little more couth.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, there's a line where Dany says Daario swaggers when he stands still. So that kind of tells you, like, you know. Squishy thing says, Book Daario reminds him of Jack Sparrow. That's funny. Like, but sober Jack. Like Daario doesn't do drugs. He exists on violence and sex, purely. That's his whole thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, Dany's she's got a bad boy thing happening.
Daario is a distraction. She must cast him aside.
Yep. I mean, I am in favor of her getting that.
He's a potential betrayer too, I think. I definitely see Daario as a potential betrayer. I feel like she could be like, I feel like Dany could come to a place where she's like, I want to leave you behind. And then he could get mad about it and potentially be one of her potential betrayers. But we'll see.
Betrayers as in like the 3 betrayals?
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
I mean, he joined her through betrayal. Like she ought to know better than to trust any of the sellswords, and I don't.
And he seems like someone that's very like he acts based on passion, like always. Like even like killing those other guys, like beheading those other guys, it was based off of like it was an act of passion. But
what was that comment you just had up? Yeah.
You telling me if this ripped ass blue and gold double dagger ass smoke show comes into your room and drops the heads of his 2 coworkers for you, you ain't gonna hit it? There you go.
Fair.
That's my man Pat Riley. Jessica Bortolazzo says, I just want to say thank you for all you guys rock. Thank you, Jessica. That was a good one.
Oh, hey, Alicia Kingston is here.
hey,
Alicia.
Hey, Alicia. I'll even give Alicia a free theremin squeak. So, where were we? Yes, with Daario. Daario, like, yeah, just to flip my wig with Daario. So we were, yes, I was pulling up Storm of Swords, Dany 5, and this is all about the rationale for taking Meereen. This will be a good start to discussing that entire dynamic. So, I will narrate this one so I can speed through this because I might skip a couple lines. And go ahead and still do the couple of Dany lines, Gretchen, if you will.
I have heard enough.
Dany did not need their squabbling on top of all the other troubles that plagued her. Meereen posed dangers far more serious than one pink and white hero shouting insults, and she could not let herself be distracted. Her host numbered more than 80,000 after Yunkai, but fewer than a quarter of them were soldiers. The rest, well, Sir Jorah called them mouths with feet, and soon they would be starving. The great masters of Meereen had withdrawn before Dany's advance, harvesting all they could and burning what they could not harvest. Scorched fields and poisoned wells had greeted her at every hand. Worst of all, they had nailed a slave child up on every milepost along the coast road from Yunkai, nailed them up still living with their entrails hanging out and one arm always outstretched to point the way to Meereen. Leading her van, Daario had given orders for the children to be taken down before Dany had to see them, but she had countermanded him as soon as she was told. I will see them.
Oh, I know. I was distracted by the chat. Sorry. I will see everyone. I will see them,
she said.
I will see everyone and count them and look upon their faces, and I will remember.
By the time they came to Meereen, sitting on the salt coast beside her river, the count stood at 163.
I will have this city.
Dany pledged to herself once more. So what's going on in the chat that we need to catch up on here? Anything important?
My cat was making noise and people were commenting.
Yeah, no, that doesn't.
And yeah, no, it's nothing important. People just talking about my cat.
I understand why you were distracted, though. Your cats are sweet. All right, so you can see here, like very clearly, this is a big part of the motivation. Again, this is just coming down to she's decided to do something about slavery. It's kind of like the world is crazy. Dany's been abused and cast all over the place, from Westeros to Pentos into the Red Waste and the Dothraki Sea, and she finally lands on her feet here, and she's just kind of planting a flag and making a stand. And she's like, "No, I'm going to start righting wrongs here." And she just sort of moves out from Astapor to Yunkai to Meereen, and it starts. The thing that gets her back up is this whole unsullied slave trade. So, again, this is more about that transformation. But here's more of the rationale for taking Meereen. And go ahead and start with, I must have the city.
I must have this city,
she told them, sitting cross-legged on a pile of cushions, her dragons all about her. Eerie and Jiki poured wine.
Her granaries are full to bursting. There are figs and dates and olives growing on the terraces of her pyramids, and casks of salt fish and smoked meat buried in her cellars.
Go ahead, Quinn.
Oh, what am I supposed to be reading?
Oh, I just figured maybe reading along. There's one Daario line.
Oh, okay. I didn't know I was supposed to be reading Daario. A fat chest of gold, silver, and gemstones as well.
Daario reminded them.
Let us not forget the gemstones.
Oh, I guess that was Daario too. That's all right. Whatever. So you can see the point here. There's also a matter of food. As she's freed the slaves, she's picked up all these refugees. She's got the freedmen, a few of, like it said, roughly a quarter of whom are officially like fighting, but they're like very unorganized. But most of them are just straight up refugees. So basically she's saying, look, I have these refugees because, you know, you MFers have been slaving the crap out of the world forever. And I've come along and ended it. And now I have all these refugees, the victims of your slavery. So guess who's going to feed them? You are. That's basically what she's saying. She's like, I've got to have their food that they have in Meereen to feed all of these people. There's no choice. And that's laid clear in this conversation with Jorah. So why don't you take Jorah in this one, Quinn?
Okie dokie. And
it's right where it says, then what do you advise Sir Jorah? That's where it starts. Oh, there's a super chat. Let me get that before I miss it. Is Dany's story arc in the show actually Fagon's or Euron's? Like one of them burns King's Landing on Dragonback and not her. Yeah, so I think King's Landing is actually going to get hit a few times. I think Fagon will take King's Landing from Cersei, and that's probably when the Sept of Baelor will go up. I do think Cersei will blow up the Sept of Baelor somehow. It seems like there's foreshadowing in that in the books. It's also an Ice Moon location, and we know the Ice Moon places are all set to blow. The Wall, the Heart of Winter, and the Eyrie, possibly places like that. So I do think that'll be the first wave. Dany will then attack King's Landing at some point, probably when Fagon holds it, and there could be wildfire caches set off by the dragons. If Euron gets a dragon, that's an interesting point, guys. I've never actually heard someone suggest that if Euron on a dragon would do basically what they had Dany do, like literally just torch the streets of the city. That's very possible. What do you think of that? Nice call, Mermaid Amathea.
That's an interesting. I could definitely see that happening. With Euron doing it. Yeah. Sorry.
I'm sorry. I was reading ahead at this Jorah quote. Like I didn't hear the question.
So somebody, Mermaid Amathea, suggested that instead of Dany burning King's Landing, that we might see Euron on, if he gets a dragon. What if he's the one that like literally burns all of King's Landing, similar to what we saw on the show? What do you think about that?
That makes a little bit of sense, because I do think Euron is probably going to be the one that gets the dragon, because he's like playing with Victarion and he's tricked him. But somehow the horn is made to serve Euron and will bind the dragon to Euron, most likely. That'd be interesting.
Yep. There's no question that Euron is capable of it. He's one of the few people, in fact, that you could think about that would happily do that. Mm-hmm. You know, so what's this? Oh, hey. Yo, Melanie Lot7.
Yay!
Hey, I finally made it. Oh my gosh. Sorry, it took me forever. Ugh. But yes, here I am at last. I'm excited to be here.
Well, I appreciate that you took an extra couple of minutes to slip on that nice mythical astronomy t-shirt, unless you just happen to be wearing it about, today. I don't know.
I came prepared.
And of course, this is a San Francisco 49ers. My beloved 49ers are in the Super Bowl this weekend, and so.
That's right.
Oh, that's happening.
Yeah. Yep.
Sports ball.
Sports ball. That's right. It's happening this Sunday. So that is why we're doing the stream today and not on this upcoming weekend. So I will be back, the week after Super Bowl Sunday with a weekend stream again. And guys, also just to give you a quick update, I had so much fun on the Doom live stream with Ball the Bard that we did last weekend and we kind of like figured out some new stuff while we were doing that. And so I got busy writing a script that night. I wrote like 5,000 words later that day, and it's all done now. It's up to about 8,000 words. Might split it in half, but long story short, I'm going to do a scripted, produced video about the Doom and the idea that Aenar Targaryen pulled an inside job, and that he might have even done it not to be the only one with dragons, but actually to end the evil of the Valyrian Empire. And I think there's a lot of good evidence for it. So that's what's going to be coming from me, along with the continuing Dany stuff. So, yes, that was fun. All right, Quinn. By the way, what were your thoughts on my Doom ideas?
I haven't seen them.
What do you think? Well, you know the whole Aenar Targaryen theory, right?
What's the Aenar Targaryen? No, I'm not aware of that theory.
Okay.
See, I've been out of the loop with this is Song of Ice and Fire stuff for months now, but tell me about it.
Well, that passage where they say the gold of Casterly Rock will bring the downfall of Valyria. Somehow there's like a prophecy in Valyria about that. It was in the World of Ice and Fire.
Must have missed that.
Yeah. So it's an old forum theory, basically. But, what most people understand is that the Faceless Men assassinated a bunch of the mages who were keeping the volcanoes controlled, and then everything blew up, right?
Mm-hmm.
Well, the extension of this theory is like, well, who was the one that was left with all the dragons? It was Aenar Targaryen, who very conveniently moved away from Valyria 12 years beforehand, set up shop on Dragonstone, and then made a ton of money selling Valyrian steel to Westeros, including Bright Roar, the Lannister sword. And there's a passage about the Lannisters paying enough money to raise an army, which is also the same term that Peter Baelish uses when he talks about hiring the Faceless Men.
So the Targaryens did the doom, basically.
That is the
conspiracy.
Yeah. Yeah. Pat Riley's calling it AT plus FM equals DV. I made it simpler. I just went with T plus FM equals D. But anyways, it is coming. And I got a super chat here. Off topic super chat. Charlie J. Off topics. That's right. Would any among you be interested in doing a video about the foods/cuisine in George's A Song of Ice and Fire and possible deeper significances and real life counterparts? That's actually pretty interesting.
We'd have to talk about oil dripping down into beards.
And peacocks roasted in their plumage.
Yes.
Potatoes.
Melanie, you sound
bacon
ready.
grease.
Yes, I'm down with it. I love talking about food, so sign me up.
That could actually be a really popular YouTube channel.
The food, what could be really fun would be if somebody decided to make each dish and going through the cookbook and sampling it and being like, "Oh, this is great," or "Ugh, this is awful." Why would you ever eat this?
You'd have to know how to
Rating
cook
it.
really well.
We're gonna need a lot of beard wiping cloths for sure.
Now it's Melanie's cat turn.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, I'm not sure which one of them it is right now.
No, it's fine. Ezra was. That's why I went and got him, because he was being for loud.
He's in his.
He was literally just sitting on the couch yelling.
Okay, guys, if you just.
Hey, if we can talk about food, we can talk about my cat.
So, no, but seriously, the food stuff is like the event horizon of symbolism for me. Like when we're doing symbolism. Sometimes these passages that are loaded with symbols have a bunch of food talk in the middle. And I'm like, onions in the soup. Maybe the onions are like moon meteors. But I always stop because it's always it's too ridiculous to even contemplate. I always back up. That's why I say it's the event horizon. It's like once you go into telling people that the turnips stand for stuff, you're not going to be taken seriously. I don't know.
George R. R. Martin just has a very expansive palate. He loves food. Loves writing about it.
All right, so I actually want to go, all right, so we were about to read this passage with Ser Jorah and Dany, and this is actually a really important one as far as pinning down her rationale for her decision-making in Meereen. So, Melanie, let's get you in here.
Yeah.
Do you have the doc pulled up?
Yep, I've got it all set. Mm-hmm.
Okay, so we are at the point where it says, then what do you advise Ser Jorah? It's page 10, I believe.
Got it.
Okay, so you will do the purple, which is Dany.
Okay.
And Quinn, you go ahead and do Jorah.
All right.
I will narrate. Actually, Baal, why don't you narrate? And I'll do the Dothraki that jump in here in red.
Okay.
All set? Then what do you advise, Ser Jorah?
You will not like it.
I would hear it all the same.
As you wish. I say let the city be. You cannot free every slave in the world, Khaleesi. Your war is in Westeros.
I have not forgotten Westeros.
Dany dreamt of it on some nights, this fabled land that she had never seen.
If I let Meereen's old brick walls defeat me so easily, though, how will I ever take the great stone castles of Westeros?
As Aegon did.
Go ahead.
Ser Jorah.
With fire. By the time we reach the Seven Kingdoms, your dragons will be grown, and we will have siege towers and trebuchets as well. All the things we lack here. But the way across the lands of the long summer is long and grueling, and there are dangers we cannot know. You stopped at Astapor to buy an army, not to start a war. Save your spears and swords for the Seven Kingdoms, my queen. Leave Meereen to the Meereenese, and march for west, for Pentost.
Defeated?
Said Dany, bristling.
When cowards hide behind great walls, it is they who are defeated, Khaleesi.
Kojogo said, Kojogo said, her other blood riders concurred.
blood of my blood,
said Racharo.
When cowards hide and burn the food and fodder, great cows must seek for braver foes. This is known. Go ahead and do that one, Gretchen.
It is known, Jiki agreed, as she poured.
Not to me.
Dany set great store by Ser Jorah's counsel, but to leave Meereen untouched was more than she could stomach. She could not forget the children on their posts, the birds tearing at their entrails, their skinny arms pointing up the coast road.
Ser Jorah, you say that we have no food left. If I march west, how can I feed my freedmen?
You can't. I am sorry, Khaleesi. They must feed themselves or starve. Many and more will die along the march, yes. That will be hard, but there is no way to save them. We need to put this scorched earth well behind us.
Dany had left a trail of corpses behind her when she crossed the Red Waste. It was a sight she never meant to see again.
No,
she said.
I will not march my people off to die. My children. There must be some way into the city.
And of course, that's when Ben Plum says, hey, we got the stinky sewers we can crawl through. And then they take the city.
Ravi.
But shout out to Ravenous Reader. Thank you.
Hat tip Ravenous Reader, there you go.
She doesn't come to my streams anymore, man. I think she's staying away from all this Dany stuff because she's like kind of anti, and she knows that I stand Dany pretty hard. So I think maybe she'll come back when I do something different, but she got a shout out anyways. So there's the conundrum, folks. You can see it. Like she's once she set the slaves free, and it started right after Astapor even, she ended up with thousands of refugees, mouths with feet, as Ser Jorah said. And she has, she can't abandon them. I mean, look at the choice there. Is she really just going to just leave them to be recaptured by all the soldiers and thrown back into slavery worse than before? Like, no, she's not going to do that.
So there's the practical element that Dany is operating under, which is I got to find a place to put all these people and to feed all these people. And then there's also the moral element to it, whereas I can't abide this system of slavery continuing, and I kind of have the resources or the potential to stop it. And so she can't just leave it how it is. Like she has to go because it's who she is.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And that's potentially the same kind of thinking that's going to lead her to confront the others when she finds out that that is the real threat.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I like that a lot.
See, you can definitely tell that the food Song of Ice and Fire YouTube channel would be very popular. As soon as the topic has come up, it has completely taken over the chat. Frey pies, mud pies, bowl of brown. It is all going around.
I don't want to try the bowl of brown.
No, well, it could just be like a really hearty stew,
Like some roast duck or like potatoes fried in bacon grease. That sounds good.
Ooh.
I would find the smallest spoon possible for the bowl of brown. Like the smallest, tiniest spoon. Be like, nope, don't like it.
Yeah, it's rat meat if you're lucky. If you're unlucky, it's like homeless guy's foot. Or barbs.
Cannibalism, yay!
They tossed the whole Simon Silvertongue. They tossed him in there wholesale. Didn't Tyrion do that?
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Yeah.
Goodbye.
Someone is mentioning Jojen paste. I wonder what you would do. Like, how would you make a version of Jojen paste for the modern audience?
Well, frog soup.
That would be a really funny twist on it.
That's how Jojen paste is.
Tastes like chicken.
Is all the frog eating that they do all the way there is all foreshadowing for. They even eat the frog soup out of the helmet, like Amira's helmet, which is a Cranogman helmet. So you're literally eating the frog soup out of the helmet. It's bad.
Out of the frog. Tastes like chicken, but also bitter, and also tastes like mother's first kiss.
Right. Yeah, what else? I just love that like Martin just throws like random things in there. I know they all have symbolic meaning, but still, like it tastes like all of these things that taste nothing alike. Okay, cool.
That's like the shade of the evening, right? How like Dany tastes many different things. It's very similar.
It's sort of like, what is it from Charlie and the Chocolate Factory? It's the everlasting gobstopper that like tastes like different things as you stuck through.
No, that was the gum that she.
Oh, the gum. Okay, that's right. It kept
going. Yeah.
Ooh, Sister Stew. I'm on that.
Yeah, for the seafood lovers, that's where it's at for sure.
Oh yeah, I bet that's delicious. Which is funny that like the bowl of brown like sounds so innocuous, but it might be cannibalism. But, like sister stew sounds like cannibalism, but it's not. It's actually seafood.
I also gotta try these lemon cakes that Sansa's always going.
Yeah, I'm there for the lemon cakes.
Oh, this one from Pat Riley gets a theremin. Just
oh god, yeah, that is in there.
Yeah.
Oh boy. Yeah, this ability to put the comments up on the screen is pretty good sometimes.
Yeah. Well, Mama Pickles
uncloaking as a frog soup. It's not that bad, guys. Person. There you go.
She was also saying earlier that she might share the lemon cake recipe with me. So maybe I shall make some lemon cakes. Maybe when Quinn comes out to visit Chicago.
Yeah.
That'll be happening pretty soon, actually.
Yeah, we can have some lemon cakes.
I would lemon cake myself into a food coma.
You're gonna have to fight me for them.
Well, that's why I can never really be mad at Sansa. I'm just like, you got lemon cakes? Okay. I forgive you. We didn't really need Ned around that much. No,
yeah.
That wasn't Sansa's fault. It wasn't Sansa's fault.
It wasn't.
It really wasn't. We all know
It's
it.
Joffrey's fault.
Yes, no, not an actual theremin, Sir Tonard. I will sate the curiosity. It is a little mini theremin. It's not very precise. You can't really play it in pitch, but it does make the right sound. So there you go.
Reminds me of American Horror Story. There's a scene with one of the witches and she's playing one. She's like, listen to the celestial tones. It's like.
I remember
so
that.
funny.
Oh, God.
It's definitely been on more than one episode of Outer Limits. That's for sure.
Callie Cash brings up a good point. Is George priming us with pages of food descriptions to help contrast how bad people will be starving in winter? That is a very good point.
I like that.
No more
idea.
lemon cakes. Yeah, but if you look at
that's why he
Ice
can't
and
write Winds of Winter.
Maybe, but I was gonna say that like the decadence of like the High Lords is like a huge theme, like from the very beginning.
Yes,
When
totally
Cersei shows
agree.
up to Winterfell and like this giant wheelhouse with like all these horses, and then like Joffrey's wedding with like 72 courses. Like they're really just being really decadent at a time where it's like it's about to be winter and everyone's about to start starving.
There's also a lot of emphasis on when the High Lords are coming to visit, the idea that they're going to eat us out of house and home too. Yeah.
Because like the preparation for the king coming to Winterfell is like so intense. You need all these candles and all this food, all this wine.
And we even got like a hat tip to that in the show where Sansa is talking, like making the preparations for the battle and everything for everybody to survive. So yeah, it is something that's worth thinking about for sure.
Go
ahead.
When you have that contrasted with Arya in the Riverlands, I mean, once you start getting a perspective that's not just one of the High Lord characters living in their wealth, like a character like Arya who's on the run, or when Jon is living with the wildlings, like you see that the gap is so huge between what the High Lords are doing and what the small folk have to live through. Like they're getting their fields, like the Riverlands is burning. Like one of the bread baskets of Westeros is on fire. And the High Lords are like, oh yes, Joffrey's getting married. Let's have all of these courses and have a giant feast and blah, blah, blah. Like
that's why Dany is super interesting.
I wonder when the Tyrells come to King's Landing, they're like, we will give them bread and they will like us.
Yeah, all you have to do is like give them food. But I was gonna say that's why Dany is super interesting, because she's really not like the rest of them. She hasn't just been like living in a castle. She's seen it both ways. Like she's been on the street, a beggar, almost starving. So she's seen it. She's seen what it's like. So I think that's part of what instilled her desire to help people a little bit, because she knows what it's like to be downtrodden.
And she doesn't, like when she's bringing her people and she gets to Vaes Dothrak, she doesn't, like selfishly take all of the food that they do find there, the figs. She is like, okay, everybody needs to eat. Oh my gosh, we have food. Everybody take it and let's cultivate it. And yeah, totally agree with you on that.
Thank you, Matthew Witham. No comment, just a super chat. And so what I was going to say about this is that George, as a good writer, all the descriptions are always used to build atmosphere in the scene. So whether it's describing people's dress, the food, the look of the place, the weather, how the stars and the moon are shining and looking, all these things are tying into the core themes of whatever's happening in the chapter. So you guys are very apt to point out, key in on the decadence. That's definitely one way that George uses food symbolism. And the height of it really is the Joffrey wedding, you know, being so lavish when people are literally starving. In the same book, we're reading about refugees streaming into King's Landing. Actually, I guess that's Feast for Crows, but it's the very next book. So, yeah, it is definitely something that George uses a lot.
The crows are the only ones that are eating.
As everyone knows. So if you want to eat some of this stuff, somebody has worked on creating somewhat edible recipes for some of this.
Somewhat edible.
It could all be terrible.
Yeah, so somebody is reminding me that this was supposed to be a Dany stream, but I figured maybe if we just got the food talk out of our system, we could, you know, I did say anything.
Move on.
You know. All right. So I actually want to go back to, guys, it's page 4, where it says chapter opening, and there's a quote here about after Dany has taken Astapor, and this is talking about the freedmen and the refugees that she picked up. We sort of glossed over this, but there's a couple important lines in here. So, Melanie, why don't you keep doing with the purple? Gretchen, keep doing the narrator, and Quinn takes her Jorah.
It begins with these they shall.
It begins with what say you? Can we defeat this? Oh no.
Yeah, that's.
Yes,
right.
That's it.
Okay. These they shall be allowed to choose freely from among their master's possessions.
No.
Oh, sorry.
It's what say you? Can we defeat this army?
The top of page 5.
Oh, okay, got it.
Sorry, 5. Yeah.
What say you? Can we defeat this army?
Easily,
Sir Jorah said.
But not bloodlessly.
Blood aplenty had soaked into the bricks of Astapor the day that the city fell, though little of it belonged to her or hers.
We might win a battle here, but at such cost we cannot take the city.
that is ever a risk, Khaleesi. Astapor was complacent and vulnerable. Yunkai is forewarned.
Dany considered. The slaver host seemed small compared to her own numbers, but the sellswords were a horse. She'd ridden too long with Dothraki not to have a healthy respect for what mounted warriors could do to foot.
The Unsullied could withstand their charge, but my freedmen will be slaughtered. The slavers like to talk,
she said.
Send word that I will hear them this evening in my tent, and invite the captains of the sellsword companies to call on me as well, but not together. The Stormcrows ride at midday, the second sons 2 hours later.
As you wish.
Sir Jorah said.
But if they do not come?
They'll come. They will be curious to see the dragons and hear what I might have to say, and the clever ones will see it for a chance to gauge my strength.
So you can see, like I said, the dynamic that's coming up here. She's already got a certain amount of refugees. The people she's calling her freedmen, like I said, they're barely a fighting force. If they were to try to stand up against real soldiers, they would be slaughtered. So that is the situation she is in. And this next little bit, which I'm going to skim through here, expands on these ideas. So it says, within the perimeter, the Unsullied had established the tents were going up in orderly rows with her own tall golden pavilion at the center. A second encampment lay close beyond her own, 5 times the size, sprawling and chaotic. This second camp had no ditches, no tents, no sentries, no horse lines. Those who had horses or mules slept beside them for fear they might be stolen. Goats, sheep, and half-starved dogs wandered freely amongst the hordes of women, children, and old men. Dany had left Astapor in the hands of a council of former slaves, led by a healer, a scholar, and a priest. Wise men, she thought, and just. Even so, tens of thousands preferred to follow her to Yunkai rather than remain behind in Astapor. I gave them the city, and most of them were too frightened to take it. So this is where Dany is starting to run into the whole cultural problem of just like freeing slaves that have been conditioned to slavery their whole lives and that don't have economic security or any sort of base to begin building a new society, and they're in turmoil. So she's only 15. She hasn't thought all this through. So now she's basically coming up against the realities of what she has done here. And the quote continues, the raggle-taggle host of freedmen dwarfed her own, but they were more burden than benefit. Perhaps 1 in 100 had a donkey, a camel, or an ox. Most carried weapons looted from some slaver's armory, but only 1 in 10 was strong enough to fight, and none were trained. They ate the land bare as they passed, like locusts and sandals, yet Dany could not bring herself to abandon them as Sir Jorah and her blood riders had urged. So everyone's telling her to cut them loose right at the beginning, right as it's starting, and yet Dany could not bring herself to abandon them. I told them they were free. I cannot tell them now they are not free to join me. She gazed at the smoke rising from their cook fires and swallowed a sigh. She might have the best foot soldiers in the world, but she also had the worst. So, you know, this is the problem that she's dealing with. And that's why she decides to go and march up to Yunkai and demand their slaves and also food and armor. She's like, yeah, give me your slaves, but also turn them out. They're allowed to pick stuff from their master's houses and all that stuff. So
fair enough.
Comments, thoughts?
You know, how else are they going to equip themselves? I mean, take what they can and go with it. And, you know, I mean, that's part of caring for her people is, you know, you're not going to loot, or, you know, you're not going to free your slaves and then not provide them with anything.
Well, it shows you how like smart and resourceful Daenerys is. I mean, because like when people criticize Daenerys, they're always like, "Oh, like she's given everything. She has help. She's got Jorah. She's got the dragons." But no, Daenerys is very intelligent, and she knows how to maneuver situations to get what she wants, and that shows here when she's trying to figure out how can I get food and resources. Yeah.
Yep. So it's kind of again a confluence of events, and I like the way that George has written this. Because it leaves, there's multiple motivations here at play, and it leaves the reader to sort of try to figure out, you know, what her decision making is. Just like with the Unsullied, you know, she had a range of choices. She needed the troops. She's also repulsed by slavery because she threaded the needle by liberating the Unsullied, essentially. But then you break it, you bought it, and this begins. This is kind of how it goes in all of Slaver's Bay. As she starts disrupting things, she's trying to take responsibility. It's not done perfectly. And when we go through A Dance with Dragons, there's a lot of her failures that are highlighted. And nobody is harder on Dany than Dany. Most of the failures that we see Dany make are coming in her inner monologue as she sits there and reflects on all the choices that she makes, from executing the slavers to, you know, she crucifies 163 of the masters when she gets to Meereen, of course. And, you know, she thinks back about Astapor, which collapsed after she left, and all these things. So we'll get into that next time, but you can see the beginnings of it laid out here. And like I said, I think it's well written because it puts her in these positions where there isn't a perfect solution and she's got to do her best. And George doesn't let her off the hook. You know, all the responsibilities of her choices are here. But at the heart of it is the heart of Dany, which is a good-hearted person, and it starts with wanting to do the right thing. And everything we talked about last time about her concept of a king and what a king is supposed to do: give himself to the people and do justice. And that's what she's beginning to try to do.
And it's a continuation of her motherhood arc, because I mean, what does a mother do but provide and take care of her children? Like, and one of the things, like, if you want to put it in modern terms, she's a single mom trying to do her best to feed her kids, and who are her people. And there just happen to be thousands of them that she's taken responsibility for taking care of. And it's interesting because it mirrors Jon finding a way at the wall to feed the wildlings and all of the men of Castle Black. It mirrors what we will probably see with Sansa. I do think that this is one of the things that the show got right is with Sansa, is that she's going to become someone who's going to take charge of trying to learning how to, you know, feed the people. Whether that's just the Eyrie or the Eyrie and the Riverlands or also the North, but like that's going to be part of what she does, is like find a way to feed people. And that's what Dany's trying to do too. She's also like, I have all of these starving people that I'm responsible for taking care of. Like, I have to feed them. And
Chris it's in on the same lines, Gretchen, saying George has mentioned he always wondered what Aragorn did after winning the battle and becoming king. He's not a fan of easy, happy endings. He's illustrating this human conflict with Dany. And like you said, also with Jon and also in other places. So it's interesting because we've always thought about like, well, after the big climax, you know, George will do a little more to deal with that, but he's actually doing it already. That's a very astute observation, Crispy. That is a lot of Aragorn's tax policy. That's kind of what we're dealing with. Only it's like, what's your policy for replacing slavery? Which is a harder question.
I was just thinking of the motherhood aspect specifically because, you know, what happens when you give birth to a child is Melanie would know, like, your milk comes in because you're immediately like, you give birth to a child, you got to feed it. Like, that's what moms do. And right. Dany has just, in some sense, like, given birth to this nation of people. They're her children now. And so she immediately has to start thinking about how to feed and take care of them. As that's part of one of the elements of motherhood is when you have a baby, you got to take care of, like, your body responds by, here is how you take care of it. But in this sense, like, Dany is taking on the role of, like, providing and feeding her children. So I just think it's interesting, especially that George has so unified the idea of motherhood with the idea of leadership with Dany. They're kind of they're inextricable in this situation. Her as queen and her as mother are like the same thing. And breaker of chains, like, all of that is all intertwined together, and you can't easily pull it apart.
Yeah, and that's what I was saying about the dragon Mhysa thing, which I thought initially was going to be this, one side of the coin, the other side of the coin, but actually no, the dragon mother is how Dany should be seen, and her dragon power is used to protect her children. And Nine Nichols points out it's ironic that Dany never had a mother, but she is a mother to her people. That is interesting. We always talk about how Dany never had children, and so she adopts all these people instead. But it's also true that part of the longing for the House of the Red Door is that childhood she didn't have. A big part of that is the mother that died giving birth to her. So that's a good point. Nine Nichols.
Yep. And Chicken Lipstick points out, doesn't Dany suckle her dragons? And yes, she does. Yeah, she does.
Right. I was getting ready to say something about that. And just really quickly too, there's the passage as she's going to Vaes Dothrak where her milk dries up because she's starving along with her people, and her milk dries up and she can't feed her dragon, she can't feed her people, and she's kind of sucked into this desperation, but she conquers it because she's smart and she's observant and she has everything that one needs to be a good leader.
Yeah.
And I've got
and a good mother.
Yeah, and I've got a little quote from the Mhysa section. It's a long section, so I'm not going to read the whole thing, but I did pull a couple of paragraphs that I want to read. And since we're on that topic, it seems the right time to do it. So, and guys, by the way, if you want to jump to where I am on the document, you just click my icon on the top of the document. But I am on page, let's see what this is, 8. When it says Daenerys, the end of House Targaryen. We're going to read this in the next passage. So, Gretchen, why don't you do Dany again, and I will take the narration here. Dany found herself wondering whether he was right about Daario. She felt very lonely all of a sudden. Meereen Mazdor had promised that she would never bear a living child.
House Targaryen will end with me.
That made her sad.
You must be my children,
she told the dragons.
My 3 fierce children. Arstan says dragons live longer than men, so you will go on after I am dead.
And this very much sets up the Mhysa moment at the end of the chapter, where she thinks about this again. It's the same inner monologue. It says, and so this is right after the slaves have started streaming out of Yunkai, and they are just starting to say Mhysa. And she asks, what does that mean? And Jorah says, or somebody tells her, it means mother. Melanie, is that you typing? Can you mute while you type?
Oh, sorry about that.
No worries. So basically, this is the beginning of the Mhysa moment. I skipped some of that text, but this picks up with Dany's inner monologue. And it says, Dany felt a lightness in her chest.
That is not my keyboard, Kevin Meeker. Don't accuse me.
Yes, keep your false accusations in your pocket, Kevin Meeker. Okay, we got it. So she felt a lightness in her chest.
I will never bear a living child, she
remembered. Her hand trembled as she raised it. Perhaps she smiled. She must have, because the man grinned and shouted again, and others took up the cry. Mhysa, they called. Mhysa, Mhysa. They were all smiling at her, reaching for her, kneeling before her. Mela, some called her, while others called Alala, or Karthi, or Tato. But whatever the tongue, it all meant the same thing. Mother. They are calling me mother. The chant grew, spread, swelled. It swelled so loud that it frightened her horse, and the mare backed and shook her head and lashed her silver gray tail. It swelled until it seemed to shake the yellow walls of Yunkai. More slaves were streaming from the gates every moment, and as they came, they took up the call. They were running toward her now, pushing, stumbling, wanting to touch her hand, to stroke the horse's mane, to kiss her feet. Her poor blood riders could not keep them all away, and even strong Belwas grunted and growled in dismay. Sir Jorah urged her to go, but Dany remembered a dream she had dreamed in the House of the Undying.
They will not hurt me,
she told him.
They are my children, Jorah.
She laughed, put her heels into the horse, and rode to them, the bells in her hair ringing sweet victory. She trotted, then cantered, then broke into a gallop, her braids streaming behind. The freed slaves parted before her. Mother, they called from 100 throats, 1,000, 10,000. Mother, they sang, their fingers brushing her legs as she flew by. Mother, mother, mother. And so this really is putting a point on it here. First, we're given the idea that Dany doesn't have, she loses baby Rhaego, but then she has the dragons. But this is actually the real fulfillment of her motherhood. She loses her child, but becomes mother to an entire nation, of her own nation that she's building, basically, of the downtrodden. It started in the Great Grass Sea when she was collecting the victims so that she, brought into her Khalasar, and now she's freeing the slaves and taking in the refugees. And this is why she can't leave Meereen. This is why she spends all of the Dance with Dragons there, even though it's kind of frustrating to the reader. She really does take responsibility for all of these people and refuses to abandon them. And that's really, like, you could almost say George is taking a long time to belabor the point. This is why it's so outrageous that D&D missed this point. Like, she spends an entire book trying to care for people that aren't even Westerosi. They're not even the people of her homeland where she wants to go and rule. So how then is she going to go to Westeros and start killing her own people? She's not going to. I hope by now that everyone that is watching these streams is very well convinced that Dany's ending is not going to be emotionally anything like what we saw on the show. I hope we've pounded that nail into the coffin, but
right. And I feel like every time we talk about it, just more and more, we find another way that we're like, oh, this doesn't make sense either. Oh, wait, this doesn't make sense either. Oh, this doesn't fit. That doesn't fit.
And there's criticisms to be made of Dany. I mean, she's trying to do a very impossible thing, and she's inexperienced, and she has different advisors, and she's trying to learn how to do this. There's definitely, it's not perfect, but the core thing that you can't miss is what she cares about, what's important to her, and what guides all of her actions. So
that's what I was just laughing at.
I loved season 8. Season 8 was the best season. Best season ever.
And this is just such a personal moment here. The tie from Dany's loss and her longing for family to this moment. This is her finding her family and finding her role in life, feeling like she's doing something right, she's accomplishing something. And this leads to all the anguish that she goes through in A Dance with Dragons, because she feels the weight of being responsible for all these people so keenly that when any of them suffer, then it really affects her. It's just such a contrast between her and the Lannisters, like Tywin and Cersei, even Tyrion, who tries to do the right thing because it's strategically, smart, or amuses him, or whatever. But this is what a real ruler should be like. And Gretchen, you always love to talk about how Dany and Sansa have a lot in common. And I strongly agree with that. And you mentioned earlier the idea that Sansa's, one of the things she's going to be doing is taking charge of feeding people during this really tough time. So I think that, I don't know, I'm definitely looking forward to the potential interactions between Dany and Sansa. And, when you sit around and wonder how that's going to go, consider what their values are. They might have different political goals, but they share a lot of the same values.
Mm-hmm.
Don't they?
Yeah, they really, really do. Which is why the idea of them being antagonistic doesn't never made a lot of sense to me, because it feels like they have a lot in common. They've both experienced, sexual violence and manipulation and, domestic violence. They've both suffered very similar things, but they also have shared values. They value taking care of the vulnerable. They value being loved. Sansa specifically says she'll make the people love me, but Dany, you can see Dany has a very similar value. She doesn't want, when she thinks that people are afraid of her or her dragons, she agonizes over the idea that people are afraid of her or afraid of her dragons, or afraid that they'll conflate her with her dragons and think of her as cruel, because she wants to be beloved by her people. Because, she thinks of herself as their mother and their caretaker in the similar way that Dany does.
Yeah, and Sansa's
they would have a lot in common.
I was just going to say that Sansa doesn't have quite the experience that Dany does of being sold into slavery, but the abuse that she suffers at the hands of the Lannisters goes a long way to sort of popping all the little bubbles of privilege and fantasy that she has and connecting her with something that's more real. And I think that in the Eyrie, she'll continue that education as well. So.
And it's not as brutal, but she was sold into a political marriage at the same age as Dany was.
True.
Like,
true.
We are meant to see parallels between what Sansa experienced when she was married off to Tyrion. Not necessarily the wedding night or the sexual encounters, but the idea of they are young women who have zero control over who they're going to marry. And they're literally married off to someone who, I mean, Sansa's married off to like a member of the family that slaughtered her own family, and is meant to just like be a good wife and take it and love him and be supportive and do all the things that she's supposed to do. And Dany has something similar. Like their husbands treat them differently in many ways, but they're in similar situations, which I think is part of Martin trying to point out that, Dany's situation is clearly like akin to slavery, but that all marriages between the High Lords and Westeros are pretty confining and restrictive and repressive to women by very nature of the fact that they have no choice in the matter.
Yeah.
Yeah, Melanie, you and I have talked about that before.
Yeah, we have. I mean, like, I feel like I don't really have too much to add because I think that sums it up really well. Everything that we've spoken about. But yeah, sorry.
No worries.
Cool. So, got the Mhysa stuff here, and of course, the climax of A Storm of Swords is the end of her 6th chapter, where basically, it's Xaro and Daxos, good old Xaro, shows up in Meereen. He's like, "Oh, look at you! You've come up in the world. When you were at my house, you weren't, Jack Diddley and all that." But basically, he offers her 13 ships, which is enough to take her people, her Unsullied and her Khalasar, basically, but not any of the refugees, back to Westeros. And Barristan is all about it. He's like, "You done pretty well here, but the people of Westeros need you, and that's really what you're supposed to do. So we asked for ships. Here we got ships. Let's do it." And she wants it as she thinks about it, but she decides that she can't because she would be abandoning all of these, basically 100,000 people or more, back to slavery. And what's the whole point of everything she did if she's going to do that? And so she doesn't. And it's a pretty good climax, if you ask me, as far as ramming home the themes that have been coming at us this whole time in her arc. It's really just that puts a point on it right at the end. She makes that decision. So
that goes back to what we were talking about at the end of the live stream that we did together last. The idea that Dany isn't leaving them without a plan, and that we're probably going to see part of that plan in TWOW. And I'm really looking forward to seeing that. She's not leaving the people that she has freed to like just descend back into a system of slavery. And I'm very curious to see what George has to say about what Dany's actions are going to be to set up a system that prevents them from falling back into slavery. Or, maybe George is going to show us that like, oh, there's no easy way and they do descend back into slavery, and that's like really sad to think of. But either way, I'm looking forward to TWOW and finding out what's going to happen.
I think they'll
next.
be on a path for evolution.
I hope so.
Because I think that's part of Dany's character. The fact that she is kind of like a modern day legendary figure. She is kind of like this symbol of like rapid change through fire, through transformation. And so that's what she's coming over there and doing. And she does all this in like a matter of months. It's all happening very, very quickly. And these rumors are spreading all across the world. The legend of the lost princess, the dragon queen. And you even see that chapter in the beginning of A Feast for Crows, where they're all kind of like discussing different aspects of Dany's myth, but they don't know because they don't have our perspective. All of these stories are true. So in that way, she is kind of like a legendary figure. There's like a myth being built. So I could see at the end of this, the East has been changed forever. You know, and yeah. So we'll see. George R. Martin does set it up, and he shows us how she builds the system and puts it in place. We'll see.
And so there was an interesting comment that I lost track of in the chat, but it was about Tyrion. Okay, so we've discussed the fact that Tyrion's been obviously very whitewashed, and in the books, Tyrion seems to be going mostly down a fairly darker path, and his whole thing is revenge against Cersei. So when he meets Dany in this book at some point, we have said that he's probably more likely to be the bad devil on her shoulder, not the angel like he is in the show, but one that encourages her to use her dragon power, attack Westeros, definitely, F Cersei and let's burn the Red Keep or whatever. However, somebody just made the point that Tyrion might help Dany unlock the political puzzle in Meereen, because he will have the motivation to move on and leave Meereen. He's going to see that Dany is unwilling to leave until they have some solution. So in the show, they just leave Daario in charge and sail off, which is kind of funny. King Daario. But I could see somebody's pointing out that Tyrion could help them design an actual political system that sticks. And what do you guys think of that? I think that's an interesting point.
Yeah. I mean, they didn't use Tyrion in the show. He didn't do anything after he got to Essos pretty much, but fail.
He basically panicked.
Mm-hmm.
That was all he did. Panic.
Yeah. So I thought that was the purpose of Tyrion anyway. That's exactly what I thought was happening, because like you got Tyrion who did so well in King's Landing, and he's coming into Dany's camp, and she's got all these problems over here. It just seemed like exactly where it was leading. But
yeah, it's probably what we'll get in the books.
Mm-hmm.
So
Shauna Bass has a comment that says, I think Tyrion is the white lion pelt that hangs on her, piloting her and manipulating her to war, which is an interesting piece of potential symbolism. She drapes herself in the white lion.
Yeah, there's also the I think it is there's a white lion galloping through a field in one of her House of the Undying visions, I want to say. And that's all people have wondered if that's a double reference to both the Harakar and the Tyrion coming. So
yeah, potentially.
We shall see. Super chat. Donnell Peoples says, I can't see Dany burning a city full of innocents. However, Dany deciding to adopt the world and having the means to enforce her vision with an ever-growing army and dragon seems a likely outcome. However, her ultimate destiny is to confront the others. So I think this falls into the potential traps category. I basically have said the Iron Throne, that's what it represents, is like a distraction from the others, the Game of Thrones that the High Lords play, all that stuff that it represents, that's what it means for Dany as well. And so the idea that she has in her head of conquering Westeros with dragons is something that she's going to have to eventually put aside so that she can go north. So I do think that this will be a temptation for a while, and this is how George will make it tempting, is like, well, Dany has, if anyone's going to be in charge, it should be Dany, because she has good ideals and she has the right moral compass to do this. So we won't see the Tyrion speech from the show. Well, of course she liberated everybody, so now she's a dictator. Like, obviously that doesn't make sense. However, there will be, of course, a temptation to use her power to set the world right. It's a pretty easy call in Slaver's Bay, but it's not going to be quite as clear when she gets to Westeros, especially if Fagon is doing a half-decent job. My name's Fagon. So, yeah, that is going to be a sticky thing there.
So I want to break in and just make the comparison, and forgive me, I'm not like a super duper Lord of the Rings fan. And it's been many, many moons. But we have like the figure of Galadriel, who's, she's tempted by this power, and she has this idea that she's going to be a terrible, beautiful, but good.
In place of a Dark Lord, you shall have a queen.
Thank you.
Not dark, but terrible and beautiful as the dawn.
Thank you.
Treacherous as the sea, stronger than the foundations of the earth. Oh, shall love me and despair.
Wow. Nicely done. Exactly that. And I don't think that Dany's going to fall for that trap. I think that Dany has been set up with enough compassion, true God, with enough compassion and enough understanding of what the commoners go through, that temptation is going to be tempered in her personality, and she won't fall for the same trap.
So Tracy is thinking that it will go in a similar order to the show where she goes north first. I really don't think so. I'm not 1,000% sure, but I do feel like the King's Landing is like thematically, it makes sense for her to walk up to the brink of that and then set it aside and go north to find her true calling to fight the others. I do think she will end up sacrificing herself to defeat the others, or if you really want to go out there, maybe she'll have to become the Night Queen in order to get them to calm down or something like that and lead them back into the trees. Who knows? But I think that she will not live past the story. And I think that her death will be, heroic, fully heroic, probably the most heroic thing in the books. It should be. But yeah, I really don't think she's going to go back to King's Landing. I think it is going to be the Starks going back to King's Landing to boot out Cersei, because the order that I've constructed, this is my headcanon. Fagon takes King's Landing from Cersei. That's going to happen in the next book. Cersei's going to go to Casterly Rock. I think George has said in an interview that we will eventually see Casterly Rock. So that's the logical way for it to happen. Cersei retreats to Casterly Rock. Again, think about Saruman getting kicked out of Orthanc. And then what's going to happen is Dany. So Fagon's in King's Landing. Dany comes to King's Landing. They fight. Fagon dies maybe. But at some point, Dany realizes, oh, I've got to go fight the others. Here's Jon Snow saying, we really need to look at these cave paintings and figure out what this is all about. So she goes north, and then while she's in the north and King's Landing is basically empty, or maybe Fagon is still there, who knows, Cersei will come back to King's Landing. So the last movement that we need is to kick Cersei out of King's Landing, just as Saruman came back to the Shire and had to be kicked out of the Shire at the end. But I think it will be the Starks that do that, and that's where we'll get King Bran. And so what the show did very sloppily is they almost made it look like Bran engineered Daenerys' downfall so he could be king, which is not at all the message that was supposed to be communicated, but it ended up looking that way. So I think in the books, it'll be a lot more separation. Dany has gone north, defeated the others, and only after that is when Bran steps up to become king. That is my headcanon, but guys, feel free to tear it up. What do you think?
Like, that makes a lot more sense to me, too. I mean, it just seems set up that way. I don't know.
I think if Dany dies too, like the myth of Dany is not going to die. It might even become stronger, especially in the East, right? So yeah, we'll see.
Mm-hmm.
It kind of
someone earlier. Oh, I don't know how to change names. Earlier said it's the Age of Heroes again when we were talking about the myth of Dany. When you were talking about the myth of Dany, and I think that makes a lot of sense. He's actually set up several characters to have these kinds of like potentially become the same kinds of folk legends as Bran the Builder, Simeon Star Eyes, all of the, or even like brave Dany Flint, like heroes that are remembered in song and we don't actually know. Like in future generations, they might not actually know what Dany actually did. They will know the myth of Dany, but they will know Mhysa, but they might not know how different that is from what actually happened.
Mm-hmm.
They're going to become the new legends for the future. I think he set up several characters to have that arc. And
that story of Dany, appearing out of the ashes is going to be told for generations and generations and generations.
Right.
So,
right.
Yeah. And I'd be curious to see like 1,000 years later how like the myths and the legends have evolved.
It makes me think of that point in Lord of the Rings when Sam and Frodo are at Mount Doom.
Mm-hmm.
And they're sitting there and everything's falling apart. And they're like, do you think they'll tell stories about us?
Yeah, exactly.
You're like, yeah, they will.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that something that Dany will run into is the Mad King reputation problem, especially if she attacks King's Landing. And the closest I think we'll get to the show is like she's fighting in King's Landing. The dragons end up setting off the wildfire, and that causes a lot more civilian casualties than she ever intends. She gets a reputation as a butcher. But the thing is, of course, she will feel horrible about that instead of like totally fine and cool with it. And I think that it's possible one of the sacrifices Dany could make is her reputation, meaning she gets a bad reputation in King's Landing and decides to go north and fight the others instead of like trying to clean up her reputation or do anything about it. And so she allows herself to be villainized in order to go and do the right thing. That's something that could happen. At the very least, it'll be a dynamic as far as people talking about her as a monster and all those things. So
I like that idea in the context of self-sacrifice. And, she has this reputation that precedes her. She has all of these titles.
It's what Ned does.
Exactly.
And John too.
Exactly. And she
Amy.
takes the honorable path, and titles be damned. She does what's right.
Yeah, Jaime too.
Jaime.
Good point. Yeah.
It's Jaime, like, being willing to be labeled and branded the Kingslayer if it meant doing the right thing.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
That would be potent if Dany makes essentially a similar choice to Jaime in a similar situation. That would be cool.
Yep.
And there's also a bit of that in Meereen too. Yeah, as Mom Pipples points out.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Yeah, she's willing to take a hit in her reputation to do the right thing.
Yes, Rhaegar show. Harry, making me happy.
God.
In case you missed it, folks, the Rhaegar show is burning up the internet. This is my 20-minute Witcher Rhaegar meme, essentially. It is on my YouTube channel. You can find it. In case you missed it, it's very stupid funny.
Highly amusing.
Highly amusing. I will take that.
I still haven't seen The Witcher.
Me neither. I tried, like, I made it through about, like, 25, 30 minutes of the first episode, and I was like, nope.
I have not tried. I've heard too many mixed things.
Can we talk about Fagon for a second? Because we've never, like, I've thrown out this rough scenario many times, but we've never really gotten into the weeds. So the House of the Undying, there's Slayer of Lies is Dany's title that's given right before it says a cloth dragon on poles before cheering crowds. And it says Mother of Dragons, Slayer of Lies. So a cloth dragon or a mummer's dragon is just that. It's like that Chinese New Year. That's basically what George is talking about. It's a bunch of people on poles, and it's paper and cloth, and it creates a big dragon, and they carry it down the procession. It's very, very fun. I used to live in San Francisco, so I've been to more than one Chinese New Year. In any case, the idea that this is Slayer of Lies means, and the idea of a mummer's dragon, a pretend dragon. This is why Fagon is probably fake. Like, the symbolism tells you the truth, guys. Sorry. I know we love the Trugon action, but he is the mummer's dragon, which means he's not really who he says he is. Dany's role is going to be to slay that lie. So how is she going to slay that lie? And what is that going to mean? Is Fagon going to die? Does he have to die in order for her to slay the lie? And the fact that there are cheering crowds for the mummer's dragon implies another problem, meaning that Fagon could be popular. He might be doing a decent job at better than Cersei, because he's replacing Cersei. He's going to look pretty good. So I'd love to hear from you guys anything about how you think this dynamic between Dany and Fagon is going to go. Will Dany know always that he's fake? Will there be a moment where she wonders if he's real? How's that going to play out? Melanie,
just pop in here? Okay, so what if it comes down to the scene? Okay, we have the scene in the show where Jon meets up with a dragon, and the dragon's like, looks like he's gonna eat him. Drogon's like, sniffs him instead, like a big old puppy dog. And what if there's a similar situation where Dany meets Fagon, and everybody's like, well, if you're a Targaryen, then sure, you should be able to control dragons. And Drogon is just like, chomp.
We do need somebody to get eaten by a dragon. George had a lot of fun with the Dance of the Dragons, having Rhaenyra get eaten in 6 bites, saving the 7th for the stranger, according to the
large snack.
Oh, damn it. Where's I don't have my little dragon blanket. Otherwise I would do a visual joke. I'm like,
so yeah, if somebody's getting eaten by a dragon, it should be Fagon, shouldn't it?
Fagon.
What do you think, Quinn?
That would interestingly mirror not Trystane, Quentin. There would be an interesting echo of Quentin. Quentin travels across the sea and gets eaten by a dragon when he tries to tame it. And then, Fagon goes the opposite direction. He goes from the east to the west to try and claim a dragon and gets eaten. And it might mirror echo is probably the better word, when Tyrion flies his dragon across the board and kills him.
Yeah, technically Quentin did not get eaten. He was burned. So I want somebody to get eaten. But go ahead, Quinn.
Burned.
Yeah, I like the idea of Fagon getting chomped up by the dragon. I mean, because he uses the word slay, and I think that has a specific connotation, like in the life of something. So it's like,
yeah, that makes sense.
Slayer of Lies. Yeah.
It would also be the opposite. LML, brought up Rhaenyra. So in the dance, Rhaenyra is eaten by her brother's dragon. So it'd be interesting to see this Aegon, who is a parallel to the Aegon in the dance. Very clearly, those two characters are meant to be parallel, to be eaten by a dragon instead. Instead of being the one sicking his dragon on someone else to eat them, it would be like an interesting like inversion to have Aegon, the usurping king, the false usurping king, being eaten by the dragon, as opposed to the one sending his dragon to eat someone else.
And the other dark parallel would be Aegon on Sunfire, who suffers horrible burns in his dragon fight and is like in a coma for a year. So there's that too.
When Aemond One Eye takes over, the Night King Aemond One Eye, you're on.
Go ahead, Quinn.
Good, you're
on.
Yep.
I called on you, and then I called on you at the wrong time. Sorry. Go ahead.
Wait, what was happening?
Oh, nothing. I said go ahead, Quinn, when Gretchen had already started talking, so I was like 5 seconds behind the whole loop. So I'll just come back to you.
I just said, I like the idea of Aegon getting devoured by the dragon. That's it. And I was just saying that because George R. R. Martin uses the language slayer of lies, like the word slay, I feel like has a very specific connotation. Like it's a very definitive like ending. So it seems like he does have to die.
I would say so.
Yeah.
Right. Sorry, Trugon. I don't know how to change names. Is all like I feel like it's like
yeah, and it would be another way for Dany to feel a lot of guilt. If George wants to give Dany a lot of guilt, her thinking of herself as being a kinslayer, if she's involved somehow in the death of Aegon, she'd feel pretty bad about that. What, Quinn?
I said it would be funny if like the dragon just like attacks him and then she's like, no, stop. And it's just like slinging him around and it just won't stop like killing him. That would be
God. Drogon, put that down. Drogon, come here right now. Put that down.
Have any of you...
Let me go ahead. Really quick, Mel. I'll come right back to you. So, Beatrice asks, do you think Aegon will be discovered? You know, how it would be interesting to see Jon Con's reaction. I can't see how that information will come out. Well, Tyrion already knows. So he's going to tell Dany. It's just going to be a question of how much Dany believes Tyrion. But Tyrion will definitely tell her. So.
Well, and we've got other characters who are going to be in King's Landing who might be able to see through the lies as well. You have Arya and Martell going, who's heading that direction. You have, which sand snake? Is it Tyene? I think it's Tyene.
I think Arya is
going to be on the small council.
How would she know he's fake?
No, I'm just saying these are people who might potentially be able to see through the lie. Like they knew Elia. Like they knew, like they might be able to see through it or might have knowledge somehow. I feel like Doran is skeptical. And Doran and Arianne seem to be. I think Arianne is skeptical as well. I think they're on the same page about this. I think they're on the same page about most everything right now after their big long conversation that we never got to see on screen. I think they're on the same page.
It may be a long shot, but there is the character Marwyn too that's headed to Daenerys. And his whole thing is like wrapped up in, it seems like, in what killed the dragons the first time and preventing it from happening another time and like trying to figure out why exactly magic is coming back. Like that seems like he's all tied up in that. He's got the glass candles. He's heading towards Daenerys. So I wonder what role he might play. And I guess like leading her like on a specific path or not. We'll see.
I'm excited. Like, I think you and I see eye to eye on some of these like B characters, Quinn, because like I'm rubbing my hands. I'm like ready for Marwyn. I want to know.
Yeah, because he's tied into so many other people. Like he's tied into Meereenese Door.
Yeah,
like, that's weirdly like specific. And you know, Meereenese Door was associated with Mara, and then also Qyburn. And both of these people are doing kind of like necromancy things.
Yes,
you know, we got Qyburn and Meereenese Door like doing whatever she did with Drogo. So that'll be interesting to see how
he's got all of this information locked up, and at some point, I'm assuming it's going to become unlocked. And what's everybody going to do with all that information? Yeah,
he could be her into like the whole magical side of things, whereas like Quaithe is like, I'm going to just be mysterious and only come sometimes. He seems like the guy that's going to be like, hey, straight up, this is what's going on. It's like, this is the deal.
Let me give it to you straight.
Yeah.
Yeah, Marwyn is definitely one of my favorite side characters. I think I may have misspoke though. Tyrion didn't. He's skeptical of Aegon. I guess it's not true to say that he figured it out. He doesn't have proof. he figured out first that he was supposed to be Phagon, but very quickly moved on to being very skeptical. He talks about how they grew him from a bean and all this stuff. So I think that he'll probably plant skepticism in Daenerys, but I'm wrong to say that he will flat out tell Daenerys that he's fake. He will tell her that he thinks that he might be fake. So Dany will be wrestling with that probably, unless she has like, magic glass candle insight or something, or just she'll probably put it together. She chews on the undying prophecies all the time. So she might figure out that this must be the Mummer's dragon, but she probably won't be certain.
See, Dany is a better person to me than me, because once I got like a certain amount of resources, I would have just like chilled somewhere. I would have gone to an island and just been like, just forget all this other stuff. But she actually wants to help. She's like, no, I can't just leave it. So.
Yeah, so people looks like they're confirming it to me. It is implied that Tyrion is highly skeptical, but it is not definitive. So yeah, that is exactly what happens. So all right. Cool. Illyrio would know the truth. So maybe they just have to torture Illyrio's fat ass until he calls it.
Tyrion
just starve him a little.
Tyrion recognizes that there's some treachery afoot. There's something going on for sure. He's wise enough to see it. He's been in King's Landing long enough. Yep.
I am really looking forward to the Martells and all of this. Like the Sand Snake, is it Tyene that's in King's Landing? As well as Arianne with Phagon. Like, I think that's going to be some pretty interesting stuff in the next book.
Yeah. I think that there are, I just don't think anyone is going to be, I don't think anyone's going to really believe, any one of the POV characters is going to truly believe in Phagon. Like, I think everyone who has a POV character is going to be in there is going to be skeptical. I think the masses are going to love it. But I think that's the contrast that Martin's going to go for, is that the masses are going to love it. They love this story because it's a great story. He's the handsome, young, dashing prince from across the sea who's coming back to reclaim his throne from the evil, crazy lady who's on the throne right now. Yeah. Like, they're going to love that shit. But I think everyone who has eyes on it is going to be skeptical. Like, all of the lords who have POV characters, all of the POV characters who are going to interact with Phagon, I think they're all going to be skeptical for various reasons. And I think it's going to be that contrast that's going to be fascinating. Like,
I definitely see them loving them.
Interesting.
Yeah. Oh, so it's Lady Nym in King's Landing.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. Who's kind of a badass, so.
Okay, so what about Alaris, who's over at the Citadel?
Yes.
Purportedly, possibly learning about dragons over there. Could she return with some interesting information regarding like how?
Yeah, Alaris, Sorella. She's embedded with Marwyn's. She's embedded with Marwyn's little.
That's the thing. I was thinking about just the other day what potentially the Citadel plot in A Winds of Winter could be like. And, I would imagine that group of friends that we see in the beginning, probably by the time we get to the end of A Feast for Crows, they've probably developed a certain like, oh, something's going on with Pate, right? I bet, I can almost guarantee you that group of friends is like, something strange about Pate. So I could see like Sam stepping in. Yeah,
once he's got that key in the book, I think he's out of there.
You think he's out of there? Yeah, but I could see a part of it. I could see an element to it being like, what's going on with this guy? Like, what is he up to? Let's just try and figure.
Well, they'll wonder once he disappears. Yeah, they'll wonder what the hell happened. for sure.
But he's there with Sam, and they're all tied up in that same thing. And I'm curious to see how that plays out.
Yep, me too. I want to know. And is it all going to go down before Euron like destroys the Citadel? Like.
Oh, I'm gonna be so sad when the Citadel burns. Like, so
the
sad.
Library of
I
Alexandria.
get emotional thinking about the Library of Alexandria burning down. So, like, Old Town, this like all of the knowledge being burned, just like hurts me. It hurts me. George is going to hurt me with Old Town burning, but it's gonna burn.
All of us who love books are going to be personally attacked. Thanks, George.
Yep. We have another paper chat.
Oh, do we? Oh, hey, there it is. Elisa Patience. Odds that young Griff and Dany are at all related. Well, if you go back far enough, I do think that Youngriff is Blackfire, either on both one side or both sides. But he's not, and he might be half Blackfire and half descendant of Aryan Brightflame, if you really want to go out there. So that would be very distant relations. I guess I don't think. I mean, that's it. He's either Rhaegar's son, or he's like at best a Blackfire, and at worst a Pisswater Prince grown from a bean.
Yeah, I don't think he's going to be Pisswater Prince. Like, I feel like I don't know.
I like the Blackfire idea. Yeah,
I think Blackfire just is so much more, and it makes sense given Martin is giving us all of these stories from the in the Dunk and Egg novellas. We're getting all of these stories about the Blackfire rebellions, and it seems like if we're getting all these stories about the Blackfire rebellions, that's going to pay off. And the only way that the Blackfire rebellion, like all spending that much time on the Blackfire rebellion, the only way that pays off is if we're going to see a Blackfire, and the most logical Blackfire is Aegon.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. Yeah.
Since we were just talking about the burning of the Citadel, so if Euron does that, like, I would wonder, like, why? Maybe I don't know. This is kind of like out there. Since John Connington does like have grayscale, if there was an outbreak, I could see Euron just being like, you know what? I'm not even gonna risk it, just burning like the entire thing.
George will get us on the side of Euron. That'll be great. Like, yo, actually, Euron did the right thing. Euron did nothing wrong.
Yeah. I don't know. Because grayscale is a serious threat to everybody. And
there was
you just need to exfoliate. You just need to buy a good loofah and just exfoliate
you be
really
healed
well.
The next night you're totally fine. The surgery has never been performed before by anybody, but you this new Citadel guy that's never done surgery before, he can do it.
We definitely don't need like gloves or anything.
No gloves, nothing.
And then once the surgery is successful, then all of academia is just so they just don't care about real knowledge and truth, that they're like, we don't care that you just cured grayscale.
I wonder what he did with all the toxic skin. Like, did he dump it in the trash? Because I would hate a servant to like touch the trash and be like,
Thanks. Into the bowl of brown. Oh
no, everyone's got it. Internal grayscale.
But in all seriousness, guys, Old Town did have some sort of disease breakout quarantine situation where the Lord Hightower sealed the city and 3/4 of the city died. He did the right thing, but then the people killed him afterwards anyway. So that has already happened at Old Town once.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Hashtag put it in the soup.
Cheese had a question. We were talking about the burning of the Citadel and the libraries. Does anyone remember what happened with Tyrion borrowing books from the Winterfell library that then got burned by the cat's paw? Like, which books he were? One had to do with dragons. I can't remember. Do any of you remember what books Tyrion was specifically looking at?
I think the thing we're supposed to notice is that one of them was about dragons. I think that's pretty much the important part. And we also know that he was rooting around at Castle Black. And in the Doom video that I am working on right now, I'm talking about how the Faceless Men are notorious library thieves. And if they stole library books from the Citadel, they were also probably stealing books from Valyria for the 100 years that they coexisted before the Doom. And they've probably been to Castle Black and checked out those books where some of the oldest records are of the Long Night and Northern history. So you have to think about the Faceless Men. They prize information. They depend on information. So we should assume they know they've been to all the libraries and they've looked at all the books and stolen or read what they needed to. So in any case.
Or they get it on interlibrary loan. They just go into the catalog and they're like, hey, can Castle Black send a book down here across the Narrow Sea? We'd like to read that book.
Can you have it sent over to the Bravos branch?
The Ravens can't really carry a whole scroll over there, so it doesn't always work super well.
What if two Ravens had it online?
I was just waiting for this. Oh God!
What, held onto the dorsal guided feathers? Okay. All right. Well, we are an hour and 45 minutes and 2 bong hits into the stream. So
where would Google searches?
You also missed that Sir Tomard Long called it a bowl of gray, which is delightful. Thank you, Sir Tomar.
Right, we are going there. Now I regret censoring out all the Mero stuff. We might as well left that in there. That is a badass scene though, where Barristan owns Mero with the staff, though, is it not?
Yeah.
I've got one of my LML 13 videos that I never put out was one comparing the White Walkers and other symbolism. I talked about that in Blood of the Other series, but I was going to do just one dedicated for that. And I noticed that scene with Sir Barristan beating Mero is a mirror to the White Walkers beating Sir Waymar in the prologue. There's so many parallels to it. It's not even funny. So it casts Barristan as the White Walker and Mero as Waymar. And it's very interesting to read it that way. So I will get to that when I get back to symbolism here. And let me just actually stop and ask the chat for a minute. How much, what do you guys think of the direction that I've taken my channel here in the last 6 or 7 months since the show has ending? I would love to see some comments here. I did the King Brand series, which was some symbolism, but more talking about like the endings of the show and the actual plot mechanics of what Green Seer Kings are like. And then we've done all this Dany stuff, which is no symbolism at all. And I'm just wondering, like, how are you guys dealing with that? Because I do plan, I'm not like giving up symbolism, but I've sort of put it on the side and I'm doing character analysis here. So there's a part of me that does wonder how much you guys are liking it. So it looks like, oh, good.
Had a couple. Yeah.
Cheesecloth wants more symbolism theories. Well, I believe you will like the Doom. The Doom has a little bit of symbolism, but it uses it to prove, actual plot stuff. But we are going to cap off the Dany series. After I get through Dance, we're going to do a symbolic foreshadowing Dany one. So we're going to go back to the Undying. We're going to basically look at all the scenes where she appears to be fighting somebody that's like the others. We're going to put them together and try to figure out what might be going on, if there's going to be any weird connections with Dany and stuff like that. So I will give you at least one solid symbolism Dany episode after we do the Dance with Dragons one. And after that, who knows?
Someone says character analysis and symbolism are not mutually exclusive.
Nope. I've been trying to blur those lines and show how. Oops, I clicked on the wrong comment. Where was that?
Dang, StreamYard.
Yeah, sometimes it jumps right when you go to click on it, but yeah, you basically read it. So yeah, exactly. They're not mutually exclusive. And even before I switched over to character analysis, I was trying to, show how symbolism affects the characters more and more. But it definitely, like, I feel like most of you guys did, everybody who's a Dany fan, like it really hurt to see what the show did. And I felt like people weren't even ready to talk about a lot of the like in the weeds symbolism stuff because everyone was just so upset about the show. So I do feel like it's been good to address that and to just, help restore faith in the character and celebrate the character that we like. Doing things like reading the taunting of the sellswords. I don't know if you caught that, Melanie, while you were on the way here, but we read, we did a group read of Dany taunting all the sellsword captains in Yunkai.
Oh, I'm sorry. No, I missed it. I'll have to go back and catch it. I'll rewatch.
Elisa wearing black. Wow. And you are known for wearing pretty much pink all the time too. So I know that means a lot for you. That's it really did affect people on a deep level. It really did, man. Dany meant a lot and means a lot to a lot of people. And so yeah, definitely good to set the record straight. And I mean, it's just so apparent. And I continue to struggle with the fact that people are running around, people that claim to be intelligent analysis of A Song of Ice and Fire, been doing it for years. And all of a sudden they're going to try to say that the book ending was more or less how the books are going to end. And that we should all accept that Dany's going to be a mass murderer and stuff. I was like, are we reading the same books? And that's why we've done this very detailed, weighty reread of all Dany's chapters, going through her decisions one by one, the small comments she makes to people, the big decisions she makes. And again, I feel like her character shines through very clearly. So I really just don't understand how that got turned around in some people's minds. But
yeah, it might be cool, like you were saying, to do like the mystical foreshadowing and throw a bit more of the like, how does the symbolism line up with what you're doing with the character arc?
Mm-hmm.
Good way to cap off this kind of Dany thing.
Totally agree.
Yeah.
A lot of people just wanted to hate Dany anyway. And then when the show like gave them a reason to be like, Dany sucks, they just like
glommed right onto it. Yeah, totally agree.
Yeah, we just even had an example of it in the chat. It's like people that criticize Dany, like 9 times out of 10, they're not coming with any kind of intelligent criticism, really. That's what I've seen. But maybe that's just the internet for you. Like 9 out of 10 comments on anything don't have it. Yeah, so who knows? But I don't know. Like I said, it's hard to, I don't know. The people that are backing the show ending are basically saying that the character that we've known for 5 books is going to do some radical changes in the last 2 books and become a completely different person. And I don't really think that's going to happen. So
I'm going to take over the world.
For me, it's just all wrapped up in the Bells scene. Like everybody
I'm crazy now.
Agreed that like it just didn't make any sense whatsoever. It just didn't make sense.
Insane. I am now insane because I heard these bells, and now I must kill.
There was
Well, so let's talk about how the
bug.
Since we talked about Fagon a little more concretely, let's, many people have figured out that if D&D got this idea of someone hearing bells and like losing it, it would be John Con because of the famous Battle of the Bells, where he, this is the thing he's obsessing about, how he should have been like Tywin and should have killed everyone in the city, and he didn't. And so Robert got away and then beat him, and he was disgraced and had to be in exile and be a drunk and sacrifice his reputation. All these things all goes back to the Battle of the Bells. So how is John Con's potential trauma and rage and the increasing grayscale driving him to be desperate? How is that going to play into the King's Landing?
He will hear the bells and then start aggressively rubbing his grayscale on everybody.
And you get a disease, and you get a disease. Everyone gets a disease. Rhyming
Save me, Melanie.
Oh, that was great. Mystica Fairy mentions that the bells are a victorious sound for Dany, which is a really good point. Like Dany associates bells with like victory, not with like trauma.
And the Dothraki bells in their hair. And even in what we were reading, Georgia Martin talks about the bells whirling in her hair, and she's all confident, like the bells. And it's like, it doesn't make any sense to have her just.
Bells are good.
I'm insane because of the bells. I must kill. It's so
some people are pointing that out in the wake of the show, that like Dany is the last person that should be like set off by bells. She should be like, yes, bells, I have won. Like,
right. I mean, and even the show canon, it contradicts itself, because there was an earlier season where I think Varys says like the bells never mean surrender, and you're like, oh, apparently now they do. Okay, cool, whatever. You don't even pay attention to your own canon of your own show. It's like, yeah, that's not what bells mean. But yeah, if anyone's gonna go crazy, it's gonna be John Con. Like it might be that it might be that like King's Landing is gonna surrender and he decides to keep fighting. Like he may not burn the city down, but he may decide that like to continue fighting even if Aegon tells him to stop. They could be towards the end of the battle and he hears the bells ring and decides like he's going to keep, just start swinging his sword and killing a bunch of people. Like, I don't know. Could be. Or maybe he tries to chase down Cersei. Like if this is in the battle I'm just like throwing ideas around, like, this is in the battle to take.
You're muted, sweetheart. I see you gesturing, but
I'm not muted though. Oh, Melanie is muted.
Yeah.
Okay, I was like, I'm not muted.
She was trying to interrupt you, but she was doing that
thing.
Yeah, I do that thing.
I do that thing occasionally. No, I agree. Like it just makes sense that the bells are going to set John Con off, and I'm totally in agreement that he's going to do some sort of rash thing that is self-defeating and is going to get him killed, number one, and is going to foil whatever plan he and Fagon were plotting together. It's going to, there's going to be that moment where there's that choice where he could ignore the bells and do the right thing and follow the plan, or hear the bells, go crazy, and just be like berserker mode. And I think what is going to happen with Jon Con is whatever plan he's hatching with Fagon, his insanity is going to basically like break apart that plan and make it not work.
I still see.
Go ahead.
No, I was gonna say I still think the destruction of King's Landing is gonna be accidental, right? Because it seems like George R. R. Martin has just set up this whole ticking time bomb, like all this wildfire, and like that could have very well, when Tyrion set the bay on fire, well, that could have been the event that destroyed all the King's Landing. It really could have. Like if a spark had just gotten to the right place, because like Sansa talks about like looking out her window and like seeing like the blazing hellfire. It's still burning after days. So I mean, it only takes like one hit in the wrong place with a dragon to be like, this is it. Yeah. Because Aegon had to have set it up in a way where if like you light one cast, right, then it ignites the whole thing, right? Because he wanted to take out everybody. He wanted to take out them all. So not Aegon, Aerys, but yeah.
Nine Nichols points out that grayscale can cause insanity, which is one of the things that we know about grayscale. Oh, yeah. So again, Jon Con is primed to go to start losing it because he has grayscale. And also I was thinking Jon Con is also primed to turn specifically against the small folk, because the Battle of the Bells is where the small folk protected Robert. Like they were, that was specifically, he was going in and trying to hunt down Robert, ugly. I think, is the Battle of the Bells, right?
Well, so that's what I was going to pipe in to say, was that maybe that's how Baelor, the Sept of Baelor, is connected to Cersei and Jon Con being stubborn or something like that. Right,
because so Jon Con would have a reason not just to turn again, not just to like go crazy in the midst of battle, but specifically to start attacking small folk or believing that the small folk are against him and that the small folk are plotting to do the opposite of what he wants to do, because that's what happened in the Battle of the Bells, is they were protecting Robert and hiding Robert from him, so he wasn't able to defeat Robert. He would be primed to start being super suspicious of the small folk specifically, of King's Landing, not just anyone. So
makes sense to me.
John,
nicely done, guys. Nicely done, and thanks to the chat too. Teamwork, everyone.
Oh yeah, that was a good comment from Mama Pipples.
Maybe Cersei may get grayscale.
And
then Cersei to marry the Night King and live happily.
Someone else pointed out, what if King's Landing is burned because the grayscale gets out?
Good point.
So there's
kind of what I was thinking about with the Citadel. Maybe
basically there are like 8 Chekhov's guns, all of which are pointed at King's Landing.
Yes,
one of them's going to go off, or multiple.
And to dip into the symbolic well for a second, the whole idea of King's Landing refers to Azor Ahai, the moon meteor. This is the whole idea of the landing site, the burning tree, and the pyre of smoke. King's Landing is one of those ground zero places. So there's lots of explosive symbolism. I mean, it's there over and over again. And in fact, there is a little bit of moon meteor symbolism before she attacks one of the cities that I clipped in here. So I will get that here. Yes. Full dark had fallen by the time Yunkai departed from her camp. And this is after the taunting of the sellswords, basically. It promised to be a gloomy night, moonless, starless, with a chill, wet wind blowing from the west. A fine black night, thought Dany. The fires burned all around her, small orange stars strewn across hill and field. So she looks up and there's no moon and the sky is black and cloudy. But where are the stars? Oh, they fell to the ground. So this is the entire long night. The moon's gone, the sky is blocked, and the stars have fallen to earth. And this is right when Dany's going to attack the city. So interesting use of that long night symbolism right there when Dany is getting ready to make an attack.
Well, there's a lot of that right before the Battle of the Blackwater, which is what Quinn was pointing out, that the Battle of the Blackwater was was one of those times that the city could have just blown up because there's so much wildfire going on. You have all of that symbolism around Blackwater, and it even looks like the bay is on fire. And from a certain light, like if you were looking at the city and you couldn't see the bay, you would just see fire. It would look like the city was on fire. You have Cersei burning the Tower of the Hand, which I think is symbolic of Cersei somehow being involved in this somehow, like, and she burns it with wildfire. Like the city's going to go up in a green blaze of glory.
I thought that was what was going to happen at the end of Game of Thrones. I thought it was going to be like Because you remember in season 2 where Cersei almost poisons Tommen because she thinks this is it. We gotta get out. I'm not gonna let them take us, obviously. And who knows what Daenerys may or could have done to Cersei if she had captured her. So I was thinking like Cersei would be like, okay, the battle is lost. I'm just gonna blow everybody up with me. I could have told that would have been a better ending to me than Dany just being like, suddenly let me just kill everybody.
It would
Cersei is the
very
type
make a
to
lot
do
more
that.
sense.
2.0.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's very much Mad King 2.0, and Cersei is already gearing herself up to, doing a very good very good impersonation of Mad King Aerys right now, and she's only going to get worse. So Cersei being the one to just be like, well, better blow up the city because I don't want to lose it. I would rather see the city burn than to lose control of the city is exactly the kind of shit that Cersei would do somehow.
She doesn't care about small folk. She does not care at all. Not even a little bit.
No.
No, she has some strong sociopathic tendencies. There's a severe lack of empathy going on there, and an inability to see anybody else's perspective whatsoever. So,
yep.
Sorry, I'm quiet. I'm having like my own like thought corner over here about green fire symbolism and the idea of King's Landing being the landing of kings, and just the idea of it going up in this big green blaze of glory. I've been kind of, I don't want to say too much about it. Some other folks and I have been talking about red, blue, and green symbolism and the idea of King's Landing, which is essentially like this really corrupt city, dying, rotting city, kind of like being returned to rubble and being returned to nature. But I don't want to get like completely off the rails here. So
can I just say, Melanie's Thought Corner?
That's right.
It symbolically parallels. I think the Fattest Leech has pointed out in one of her essays, one that she talks about incest, that King's Landing is given similar. There's symbolism similar to Craster's Keep.
Yes.
And Craster's Keep is this like den of incest that, seems like it should be destroyed. But they're both called like midden heaps or rubbish heaps. Like Craster's Keep is specifically built on top of a rubbish heap. And King's Landing is called a rubbish heap a couple of times.
Smells like a rubbish heap.
Smells like a rubbish heap. Volantis has something similar. And I know we've talked before about the possibility that before Dany gets to Westeros, she's going to burn Volantis. Specifically like the inner part of the Volantis where all the slave masters and all the wealthy live. And that has similar symbolism too of like it's corrupt and rotting and just it is ready to go up in smoke. And King's Landing has
in particular.
Yeah, exactly.
Absolutely.
And King's Landing has, I think you're right, Melanie, to bring that up, that King's Landing has some similar symbolism there. It's a rotting city that, it's like it's a cancer. It's like a sore spot on.
It's a garbage fire. That's what we're talking about here. Garbage fire.
Burn the garbage.
When it blows, fire. It will be. King's Landing, #dumpster fire. It will be. It will be a dumpster
That's
fire.
Good.
So
moving on. Sorry.
Well, actually, just to put a pin on the stars thing, we get the same language also at Dragonstone. And thank you very much for bringing up the fact that it is at King's Landing. And maybe that would be a good idea to get back into some symbolism. I've been promising a Battle of the Blackwater symbolism special. I've dipped into it a few times, but it's like literally 6 chapters of symbolism. It's like all symbolism. So maybe I should do that afterwards. But so this is a quote. So remember the first one in Yunkai was there, a moonless night, starless. And then it said the fires burned all around her, small orange stars strewn across hill and field. Now here is the Crescent prologue on Dragonstone, Dany's home in A Clash of Kings. A night wind whispered through the great windows, sharp with the smell of the sea. Torches flickered along the walls of Dragonstone, and in the camp beyond, he could see hundreds of cook fires burning as if a field of stars had fallen to earth. Above, the comet blazed red and malevolent. So there, the important symbolism is linking the idea of fallen stars to the comet. But of course, Dragonstone itself has all the exploding moon symbolism, and there's more in the paragraphs before and after that. But I wanted to bring that up because it was parallel to the quote in Dany's chapter. So she's seeing this imagery of the fallen stars, and we also see it at King's Landing, and we see it at Dragonstone. So pretty cool stuff there. Starfall, yes, Starfall. So let's talk about House Dane. Let's do that on the way out of here. I do think so. I have mentioned that because I don't think Dany is a Dane or Jon, but both Dany and Jon have a little bit of Dane blood if you go back like 3 generations, some of which are incest generations. So they actually could have a decent amount of Dane blood. But so you guys know that I have suggested that if Dawn is to come out to play, if we're going to see Dawn in action ever, that the way that it's going to happen is that Darkstar is going to steal it. Because most of you guys, and some of you in the audience may not know, there's a thing called the 5-year gap, which refers to George's original plan before he did Feast and Dance. He planned on having a 5-year gap after Storm of Swords, so everybody could grow up. And then he was going to come back with a 5-year gap having happened, do a bunch of flashback and catch us up. It didn't work. He wrote some of it, didn't work, and he abandoned it. And so what has happened now is that all of the characters, originally, he planned on being 5 years older by the end of the story than they're actually going to be. And George has talked about this, and he said, if a 12-year-old's got to save the world, so be it. And people are thinking of Bran here. But the point about the House Dane is that before the 5-year gap, we had this character, Edric Dane, Ned Dane, who runs around as Barrack's squire, which is very significant because Barrack is a walking Azor Ahai Greenseer symbolism guy, and his adopted son is Ned Dane, who looks very Valyrian. He's named after Ned Stark, but he's a Dane. I've talked about some of his symbolism. But after the 5-year gap went away, like before, Ned Dane was going to be 18 or 19 by the end of the story. So this is somebody who could be awarded Dawn and could leave Starfall. He could join somebody's army, Fagon or Dany's army, and we'd have Dawn running around. And I've always speculated that if Dawn's going to get into somebody's hands, it'll probably be Jon. He seems like the kind of guy, especially if it's really ice, then Jon should wield it. But it's going to get to him by somebody basically taking it out of Starfall and then getting killed. So since we have the 5-year gap, we can't do this now because Ned's only 13. He's not even like strong enough to pick up Dawn, which is a great sword. And so we get Darkstar. And I have speculated that the whole reason that Darkstar even exists is literally because George needed an older character to get Dawn out of Starfall and into action. And instead of being awarded it, Darkstar, being a shitty human being, is obviously going to steal it. And so that is what is going to happen. He's going to steal it. He's going to be fake Arthur Dane, essentially, and he will join Fagon's Kingsguard. We'll have fake Rhaegar's son and fake Arthur Dane, essentially, and they'll be happy for a little bit until Fagon dies. Not Fagon, I'm sorry, fake Arthur Dane, which is Darkstar. He dies. Dawn comes out, gets, somehow Jon gets it. So
is he Arthur Knight? Because he's not Arthur Dane. He's Arthur Knight.
He's Darkstar. He is of the night. So,
he is of the night.
So do you think Dawn could come out to play, Quinn? What do you think Darkstar is going to do? Is he going to steal Dawn? What do you think about him interacting with Fagon? What do you think the Danes are going to do? Any of those questions, feel free to grab them.
Yeah, I like your theory about him stealing Dawn. It's pretty cool. I don't know exactly what George R. Martin is planning on doing with Danes and all these characters. I mean, there's so many things that are hugely tangential that could potentially, that appear tangential, that could be expanded upon. So we'll see. Yeah, but I do dig it. I like it. It seems plausible.
Plus, stealing Dawn, so it's good, symbolism. Yeah. Stolen Dawn, he's of the night.
Exactly.
The long night is like a stolen dawn. It's a dawn that never comes. So, yeah, there's lots of good stuff there. Melanie or Gretchen?
I was just going to say, you don't make a sword as awesome as Dawn and just, hide it away and never use it. So, it's got to come out. It's too cool not to play with.
So, my other tin...
Sorry, I'm trying not to make a bunch of dirty jokes because that's all that I've got in my head when you're
Well, we are past the 2-hour mark, so...
Sorry. I mean, you literally had quotes earlier about the Titan's bastard saying that he should bring out his sword, and now you're talking about the sword's got to come out, and I'm like,
we're all friends here.
It's got to come out to play. It's got to come out to play. So Jon, obviously, it would make sense if Jon wielded it. He's part Dane, he's a little bit Dane, and if Dawn is the original ice, as I have proposed, and people have sung, then. then Jon would make sense because he's the Stark and he would need ice, the real ice. And all those lines about how he's not happy with Longclaw and he keeps thinking about his father's sword, ice, and he wishes he had ice will be fulfilled because he'll get Dawn, which is really ice. But the other tinfoil is that Dawn, being pale as milk glass, is actually functions like a glass candle. And similar to the sword of Shannara, of those of you guys who have read the Shannara series, it's a sword that you don't use to chop with. Like it has magic that reveals the truth of things and stuff like that. And there's other stories where you have a magic sword and the actual purpose of it is not to chop things. And so what if Dawn has a magical ability? What if it's like a glass candle? What if it's a dragon killing sword in the same way that Valyrian steel might kill others? Dawn is like a white Valyrian steel sword. So could it be used to kill a dragon if it's really ice? I'm just throwing the tinfoil against the wall here, guys.
Mm-hmm.
I
I don't know either. Someone said, do you think Fire and Blood will turn out irrelevant to A Song of Ice and Fire? No.
No.
And how is that even possible?
That's what I was laughing at. Yeah.
So many things that parallel Fire and Blood already. I mean,
I'm going to be devoting my YouTube channel for the foreseeable future to talking about the dance of the dragons and how it's relevant to our understanding of, the next two books story. So
it's totally relevant. I mean, it is A Song of Ice and Fire. It's a part of it.
Yep.
Fire and Blood is layered. There's also plenty of symbolism in Fire and Blood as well. And of course, I have dipped into a lot of those dragon battles in many essays because there's always mythical astronomy when the dragons fight. That is guaranteed. So,
and even beyond A Song of Ice and Fire, the theme of Fire and Blood runs through a lot of George's work. So I think it's something that's on his mind that he's trying to work out the kinks on.
Right. You can see that he's echoing like characters and plot arcs and kind of the interaction between different archetypes of characters. He does that through A Song of Ice and Fire, but he's just continuing to do that in Fire and Blood.
Absolutely.
While also giving us like a very in-depth look at both like the Targaryens and how they're not a monolith, they're not even as a family, like they're so different. But of course, like he's very clearly exploring the disempowerment of women. As Melanie and I both are interested in talking about disempowered and silenced women. That's a huge part of Fire and Blood. Is Martin?
I'm interested in that too. Come on.
I know you are. I know.
No, you guys have both specifically done work on that. Yes.
Yeah.
That's what I meant.
I don't know. Maybe. No, I don't know. This is kind of like out of left field, but I am working on this graphic novel. Which like all of my characters are female, all of the lead characters. So maybe you guys could take a look at it. I don't know because I don't want to like be like look at it because I know some people don't have time to like read a whole script. So it's like if you want it to, I could show it to you. Okay, cool.
Yes, please.
They both are excited. Look at that.
After the stream, I'll send it to you guys.
Cool. Yeah, beta readers. Excellent.
I have cats. Too much cat. Goodbye.
Yeah, where'd your dog go? You were getting doggy love when he hopped in there, Quinn.
Yeah, he's outside of the door. He's whining. He wants to come in because he'll jump all over me and be like, "Love me."
Well, we're just about done. So if you want to let him back in, you can.
Oh, get over.
Let everyone freak out about the dog. He didn't get any attention earlier.
I don't know how to change names. Is asking about Burbs.
Oh, Burbs went to bed. I put them to bed
Burbs
just before
sleeping.
I went live. Yep. They like to go to bed early. They like to get lots of rest. So.
My bird was up way past bedtime. Oh, hi, pup.
A little fluffy
kisses.
That's what you're gonna get.
Mm-hmm.
So I will put out the last call on Dany questions for the chat. If anybody wants to get in any final questions about Dany that they would like to hear us talk about.
Oh my gosh, what a good puppy. What a good puppy.
He is being a good
I don't know how to change names. Mummer Burbs. Yes, I have.
Cloth dragons.
They're definitely mummers.
Well, he's saying mine is a mummer's burb because it's not a real burb.
Oh, I see. Oh, I didn't even see that. Is that a porg?
No, it's an owl. It's a little
owl.
felted owl.
Okay.
Aww.
The screen just made it all kind of white and blurry, but yeah. So it is.
Yes.
Is that like Hedwig? It looks like Hedwig.
It could be Hedwig. It was not specifically Hedwig, but now I'm going to name it Hedwig. That is the name to my verb.
Okay, so we got a similar
It makes
question
sense
coming
now.
in from two different people, which is the obvious one. What about Jon and Dany? How is their relationship going to manifest in a way that is more satisfying than Rey and Kylo Ren, which really got screwed up there at the end?
Boat sex.
Hashtag, what was that? You cut out. What was it? Oh, boat sex, right? Yes. So we've talked about this a little bit. I think Melanie and Gretchen and I on some of the Dany streams, but I think that it's likely Jon and Dany might have a romance, but not one that is intended to like reestablish the line or have children. I think it will be, if you look at their characters and what they're going through, they do seem to be set up to appreciate each other and to respect what each other does and stands for. And I think that will be very important to creating this alliance, and sort of like on the show where we saw that Jon and Dany had to gain each other's respect so that Jon could convince Dany that this was a real threat. She needed to come north. We'll see some of that. Yeah. What do you guys think?
I like the idea of, once Jon's heritage is revealed, that becoming something that pulls them closer together. And, you have the whole history of Targaryens intermarrying, which I don't know, to me, that seems like kind of a weak reason for them to get together. Because if any of the characters are going to blow off tradition, it's going to be Jon and Dany. But, I think maybe less than a romantic inclination between them, it would be almost more of like a familial bond between them. That could
I would love it
form.
if George had the courage and imagination to do that, to like set this up and not have them be a romantic relationship, but actually like two intelligent, empathetic people teaming up to try to save the world that respect each other. Like that would be interesting.
Maybe I'm like just bitter, but a lot of times I hate romances. Like in movies, I'm like, why do we always need a romance? Between them? Why does the main character always need a partner? Like they don't.
Well, it's often forced. It is often just like a checklist thing that doesn't really make much sense with the rest of the plot. Yeah.
But we'll see.
I just don't think that there's enough time to explore like a real deep romance between them.
Well, they could definitely do some trauma bonding as they fight the others or something,
There could be some trauma bonding. And if they, as two consenting adults, want to enjoy some time together, like, great, awesome. They can enjoy their time together. Especially because I do think that Dany is not going to survive the series, because I think she's going to sacrifice herself. I feel like there's just not enough time to really explore like a romance. And even if they want to, spend the night together, I'm not sure that Jon's going to be able to perform.
Well, that's the other question, is the Jon physiology question. Yeah. So
about whether is he like as a zombie with no blood flow.
It's actually up to Bran. It's all up to Bran. Because I think if Jon is resurrected by Mel, he's going to be like Barrack, which means no boner. But if Bran gets involved and does a green seer resurrection, it might be of a higher quality, and then maybe it's pro boner.
So Bran has to go through the thought process of wondering whether or not he's going to give his like dead brother that he's resurrecting the ability to have a boner.
That's
exactly how he's going to write it.
There's got to be a pro bono pun in here somewhere.
I did my best. Yes.
Nice try.
Bran is Bran pro bono or not? Does Bran work
pro bono? Exactly.
Yeah, I don't think he cares about silver and gold. But
no. But the other thought that I had that I mentioned a little bit earlier in the chat is that I think it is important that regardless of
here we are.
Sorry.
Yeah, no, who was said earlier?
It's been foreshadowed.
That he could go down on Dany.
And it's like Missandei and Grey Worm all over again. Be like, hey, we can still get down. It's cool.
Okay, so wait, we have. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Gretchen.
Show Missandei, obviously.
Right. Yeah. Not in the, that like one thing I think is important to think about is that regardless of whether or not there's any romantic or emotional, mystical or spiritual bond between Jon and Dany, whatever that looks like, I think it is important that Jon and Dany can't have children. Like, because there's the whole thing about, we were talking about this when it came to the corruption of King's Landing and incest and inbreeding. Like, Martin is very much anti-incest, anti-inbreeding, and is always in all of his work. It's a pervasive theme. It's entirely negative. It's self-defeating, and it always ends up destroying itself. That's the self-defeating factor. And so the idea that the last two official scions of House Targaryen are infertile, I think is an important thematic element.
Yes,
that Jon cannot have children, Dany can't either, and they are the last of the dragons. Like, they are the last of the Targaryen, the last of the Valyrians, the last of the dragons. Like, and they can't have any more children, so the line ends here. This is where it ends, and I think that's important. So even if they can have sex, even if Bran, works pro bono with Jon, like, they're not I don't think they're gonna have a magical baby. Like, I think that is totally against everything that Martin wants to say with and there wouldn't be time anyway, because Dany's probably gonna die. So
the only scenario I could picture that in is if like they have to do magical baby sacrifice, but that seems like a really dark way to end. So I don't.
That is really dark. Baby sacrifice.
Well, I mean, not like literally, but think about what happened with Dany, where in Game of Thrones, where the death of Rhaego somehow figured into the birth of the dragons, and the others are all about stealing babies. So maybe there's some magical sacrifice that needs to be made. But because, like I said, I threw out the idea that maybe Dany has to be the Night Queen. So maybe she's pregnant and then she becomes the Night Queen or something. But I don't know. It seems really kind of weird. So I don't really think it's going to be about babies and pregnancy. I totally agree with you, Gretchen, that the idea that they're both probably infertile is important for symbolism. I think that points us towards the idea that there'll be no more dragons or others at the end, that they're going to cancel each other out. And this is the last gasp of magic, the swan song of magic. That really how this whole story reads to me anyway. So Dee Volano sent in a super chat earlier that I missed, and she has repeated the question. So thank you, Dee.
Oh yeah, no, that we talked about.
Oh no,
that.
we did. Yeah, we did answer that, Dee. I guess I didn't put it on the screen and acknowledge her and give her the
right.
But we did, we did kick that subject around, So, or maybe do you think the history and yes. So let's tackle that question a different way. So we've already talked about the idea that the Dance of the Dragons has a ton of symbolic foreshadowing for the end game. And Gretchen, you're going to be working to unpack a lot of that. We've talked about a few of the parallels already. Another thing that you're going to talk about, and I've already sneaked a peek at Gretchen's first essay, the script, but one of the things you're going to talk about is the idea that George gave us all of the dance with the dragons first in the little side books, and then in Fire and Blood and the World of Ice and Fire, because he's trying to prepare us for what's going to happen when Dany starts using her dragons, or when Euron steals a dragon, and when we see dragons fighting. He wants us to know how horrific it's going to be. That message is driven home over and over in all these dragon battles that we see. And the other part is the idea that Westeros, tends to like kings better than queens. And we mentioned the idea that Fagon will probably be popular. Fagon has a penis. Dany does not. And that has been a thing in Westeros, especially with the queen who never was, who plays a large part in the dance. So more than just symbolic foreshadowings, there are important historical precedents that will matter in universe to the people there. Like Dany's going to run into the same problems that the queen who never was did. And when the dragons fight, we will see a lot of the same things that we saw there. So there's a lot of reasons to get into Fire and Blood and to consider it relevant. I think all of the side books that George does are relevant. For example, Bloodraven was developed in the Duncan Egg books before we met him at the end of the Storm of Swords, so that he wasn't just some old guy in a cave, but we're like, oh shit, it's Bloodraven, he's still alive. So all the side books are pretty important to the story, I think.
Yep.
There you go.
Like dragons, I mean, it's very well said in a Winds of Winter pre-release chapter that everywhere the dragons danced, the people died. That's what Fire and Blood shows us, is that everywhere the dragons fight, people die. That's what happens. Like, people die brutally, horrifically. It's terrible. Like, the countryside gets burned, villages get sacked. It's not pretty when dragons fight. So this idea that it's going to be like super cool and yeah, dragons fighting is like, no, dragon fighting like isn't actually like cool. It's pretty brutal and savage and brings a lot of death and destruction with it. And so we should be nervous, I think, is what, after reading Fire and Blood, and then you think about Dany coming west with her dragons and the possibility that someone on another side, whatever the other side happens to be, might end up with a dragon. So we might see two people on dragons fighting each other. Like that should make us nervous, like anxious, and should be like kind of horrifying that like dragons are going to come and like, even if it's just like a dragon battle, people still die when dragon battles happen. Just even if it's just the dragon riders fighting each other, like there's always going to be collateral damage. And it's
right.
bad.
And that's just what Dee was getting into also as well, is like the people and the dragons are competing to make the greater horrors. And for all the talk of Dany's dragons being this deadly weapon, they've only killed a couple of people so far, and like a slaver, and like the one person they killed that they shouldn't have was the girl Hosea, of course, when Drogon ate her, the little girl. But apart from that, all the killing has been done by men and soldiers and armies and kings. So
I'm not even still entirely certain that Drogon. I think it's an open question whether or not Drogon actually killed Hosea. At least in my opinion. Like
I agree.
Go ahead, Quinn.
I said I agree. It's an open question because that's totally something that they could have set up to cripple Daenerys. And there's various forces working against her.
I've actually never thought about that.
Yeah.
Yep.
On a thematic point,
I read it, but anyway, go ahead.
On a thematic point, it doesn't matter in the sense of Dany, like it shows us how she feels about the dragon power, but it does matter in the sense of the plotting in Meereen, because we still don't know if Skahaz is like manipulating Barristan in a way that we actually don't like, or who the real Harpy is. Like there's still unclear what all is going on there. So we shall see.
Right.
All right.
Yeah,
well, I think
regardless of whether or not Drogon actually burned Hosea, Dany feels shitty about it and is, that's what triggers her to chain up her dragons. So regardless of whether or not it was true, that's what we're supposed to think about, is Dany believes it and therefore behaves in a certain way.
And I would love to see more God's Eye action. We are supposed to see the Isle of Faces, which I think will probably be a brand thing. But I did track a pattern of dragon people going to either the Isle of Faces or places that symbolize the Isle of Faces. In one of my Dany and the Green Sea, I think it's Dany and the Deep Green Sea one, like Silverwing went to an isle in Red Lake and retired. One of the Adam Valerion went supposedly to the Isle of Faces before he went to one of the battles of Tumbleton. It's not out of the question that we could see dragons and the Isle of Faces and the God's Eye, happening again. A lot of the dragon battles have been fought around the God's Eye. There's no question about that. So, Carl Karsnark, you and I both have our fingers crossed for that one. But like I said, this is probably a good place to go ahead and call it. We are at 2.5 hours. Thank you to all of my guests.
I was just going to add one final thing. Ideally, what we would get is atop Drogon fighting Night King atop a dragon, because that would be so. I mean, that would parallel so nicely something that happens in the dance. Just to have Dany in a dragon battle and maybe 2 other dragons involved. That would work even better to have Dany fighting against 2 dragons, because there's a character who has that happen that strongly resembles Dany.
And so the two battles that Gretchen is talking about, of course, are the one over the God's Eye, and then Sunfire versus Melis and Vhagar. So, yeah, those are both. Nearby. Which happens where?
It's nearby. I don't think it's over the God's Eye, but it's like around there, right?
Well, so the one with Daemon and Aemond is over the God's Eye. The one with Melis and Sunfire is at Rook's Rest.
Oh, okay, that's Rook's Rest.
Yep. So, any case, let's let everyone plug their stuff on the way out, and then we will go. Gretchen, you had the mic, so go ahead and we were just talking about it, so.
Oh, okay. Again, I am Baal the Bard. You can find me on YouTube as Baal the Bard. And My YouTube channel is called The Dragon's Reign, and I am going to be diving into the Dance of the Dragons and talking about the history, the characters, the symbolism, and potential parallels with what we have seen already happening in A Song of Ice and Fire and what we might see to come in the next 2 books.
There you go. Melanie Lot7.
Hey, my YouTube channel is of the same name, and you can find my one lonely YouTube video on there. Hopefully someday I'll have something else to contribute. But, you know, I have some ideas in the works. I got a really fun, kind of a mini quick idea the other day. I don't really want to say what it is yet, but the muse struck and I listened, and the writing bug is hitting me again. So
this is good to hear. Well, your first essay was outstanding. Melanie Lot7 YouTube channel. And what was the official title of it?
What a good question. I think it's just The Silent Sisters in A Song of Ice and Fire. And I do have another essay. It's on my WordPress site, and it has to do with the king under the hill symbolism that you can find throughout. So yeah, maybe WordPress is a better place to find me. Either way, I haven't put out a ton, but I think hard. So.
And Quinn, now of Quinn's Ideas, formerly Ideas of Ice and Fire. Oh, you are muted or unplugged or something. I can't hear you, buddy.
Most importantly, I just put the link in the chat. Get put on the email list for my graphic novel.
Yes.
Here's some of the concept art. Got the whole script and all my concept art in this big old book right here. Wanna read a graphic novel about a horror story about witches and stuff? Get put on the list. It's fun. Do it. And also check out my channel if you want, whatever.
What do you draw apart from witches? More witches. Very good. So yeah, get on that mailing list, and there's the link to there. Very good, very good. We're all very excited to see how that goes. And now you got 2 new beta readers too. So
yes, you do.
Should be fun. All right. All right. Well, thank you guys for coming through, and I will see you, like I said, in a week and a half. Not this weekend, but the next weekend, we'll be doing a Dance with Dragons, Dany stuff, and I may or may not get my Doom video out before then. Maybe. So that's it. Go Niners. Thank you, my guests. Thank you, my wonderful folks in the chat, and I will see you soon. Bye. And broadcast.